in Russia, they announced that starting from January 1, the only way you can take non-ferrous metal out of Russia, you need to have an export license. And people would kill for these licenses. There was a very limited number. And my friend from Ukraine, he says, there's no way I'm going to get this license.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, people actually were murdered literally. I'm not figuratively, like a brain on the sidewalk. And he said, I don't want to be in this business. And I'm like, holy shit. And this was like 90% of our business. I'm like, so I said, so how are you going to generate money? He goes, well, what else can you buy? And that's when all the experience of cattle hides, pig skins, casein, citric acid, all the other kind of stuff, scrap metal you could take out.
Okay.
And this is when all of a sudden we get truckloads of wire. And I'm asking, where did this wire come from? Because it looked like it's been snapped off a power line. And I said to him, don't. I don't want to be involved in that. Because one time a trailer load of aluminum canoes arrives. I'm like, did you rob a summer camp? Because I had nothing to do with it. It was a delivery to us. We're just passing it on.
Real, raw, and honest stories from founders who are in it and going for it. With your hosts, Mick and Trav. This is the Growing For It podcast. We're here on the show today with Ilya Katsnelson. Thanks for joining us here today. Ilya, you have quite an interesting story, from being born in the former Soviet Union, moving to the United States, living there for many years, getting your U.S. citizenship, and then moving to Denmark, where you currently reside in Copenhagen. You have been a serial entrepreneur, businessman, investor, philanthropist, father, husband, many, many things. And if that wasn't enough, you also have had this whole wild story of political turmoil as well, even involving a red notice from the Interpol under false accusations from the Russian government, which even resulted in being imprisoned for 2 months approximately. We have a lot to cover today, and we are super excited that you've taken some time to join us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. And none of this I planned in terms of the Interpol part, but shit happens along the way.
Yeah, I bet. And I suppose a great natural way to kick off, Ilya, is if you're willing to just give us a brief intro to yourself, and who is Ilya Katsnelson, and what are you up to today?
Yeah, I'm always reminded of a question when Putin first came on stage. One of the first questions asked by journalists was, who is Mr. Putin? It came out of nowhere. To describe myself, it's always difficult to describe oneself, because I think it's much better to allow others to do it. You did a very good synopsis of an introduction. The other day, I was talking to my wife, and I said, listen, I need to get a new business card. And she said, well, I think there's just 2 words to describe you, investor, advisor. And that's what I do. When people ask me my current profession, I'm involved in a lot of different companies, but my main role is to be an advisor to founders and to my friends, and also to be an investor when I feel that it's the right project where I can meet the 5 criteria that I have for investment. So I suppose you want me to tell you what those 5 criteria are.
I was going to say my interest is piqued.
Yeah, exactly.
Got to hear something about that.
Okay, so, and not necessarily in this order, but the first one is I have to learn something from it. It has to be something that gives me an opportunity to expand my horizon. So whether it's a particular type of software, a particular type of industry, a particular type of service, if I can see that I can gain some benefits, some knowledge from it, so that meets that criteria. I have to learn from it. Number 2, the founders have to be people who I can trust to listen to my advice. That it isn't, they're not just looking at me as a money bag. So I feel that there should be give and take, and I can contribute to their development, because usually it's people who are less experienced than myself and younger. So it's not because I'm smarter. I just have more experience.
For sure.
I made the mistakes that I'm trying to get them to avoid. The third thing, it has to be of benefit to humanity, to the world that we live in. So I don't invest in hydrocarbons. I don't invest in weapons. I don't invest in alcohol, tobacco. I don't invest in military equipment. Not necessarily that I believe that it's some of those things are bad, or all of those things are bad. It's just that I can think of many other things where I can add more value.
It's not your thing.
Right. The fourth thing is the added value that I give has to be beyond money. So I see that my network, my knowledge, my experience could be beneficial. And that ties in with the criteria that the founders have to listen to me.
Yeah.
And the fifth one is there's got to be hope that it makes money.
Yeah.
Because if it doesn't do that, I mean, all the other previous four, it's nice, but sorry, that's just not going to fly.
Yeah, it's got to be able to sustain itself, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, not to claim that all my projects or the majority of them have been able to make money, but all of them I can tell for sure I learned something from it and I had fun doing it. Yeah. So I think that's really important. I need to be enjoying what I'm doing.
I think also one thing that's important to say for the audience is you're a self-made man. You're not born into riches, and on top of that, why don't we take the audience way back to Ilya Katsnelson's beginning? And that beginning is in the Soviet Union.
Right.
Taking us back there, what are some of the most significant things that you remember? Because you were about 8 years old.
10.
When you moved away from the Soviet Union.
Right.
How was life as you remember it?
You know, it's really interesting. I have very, very clear recollection of my life in the Soviet Union. And I was talking to a good friend of mine who said, how the hell do you remember this stuff? I mean, I don't remember pretty much anything before I was 14.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, because you lived a vanilla life. Everything was predictable, straightforward. You knew everything. But for me, I had these critical events in my life, these moments that were watershed moments. Some were cathartic moments. So when you go from the world of the Soviet Union at the age of 10 into the world of Western capitalism, there's like this rift, it's before and the after. And of course, if you have our memory, the way it works is you juxtapose things, so you have a point of reference, and that's how we remember stuff.
Yeah.
So for me, life in the Soviet Union is very memorable. The only good thing, and I said this before in one of my interviews, the only good thing about being Jewish in the Soviet Union is you can get the fuck out of there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because basically nobody could leave the Soviet Union, but after Nixon visited, I believe in 1974, they and the signing of the Helsinki Accords, they kind of said, oh, okay, well, the Jews can go to Israel. You know, they can leave. We don't want them to leave, but all right, and we'll make it difficult for them, but you could still do it. And my father was very focused on leaving the Soviet Union, and at one point, after coming to the United States, I asked him, Dad, when did you decide to leave the Soviet Union? He goes, 1956. Now, being a student of history, I remember the Hungarian invasion. And I said, was it because of the Hungarian invasion and the Russian tanks in Budapest? He said, nah, forget all that. I didn't really care about that. But I applied for a university spot at the Moscow Aviation Institute. And I didn't get in. And I said, yeah, and what did you fail? He said, German. I failed my German exam. I go, were you bad at German? He goes, no, I was the best one in my class. I said, well, why did you fail? Well, with a Jewish last name, Katsnelson, they weren't letting Jews into the Moscow Aviation Institute. And that's, he said, when I realized this is not my motherland, this is my stepmotherland.
Yeah.
It sounds much worse in Russia, you know. It's the evil stepmother from Cinderella, you know. Machicha. Ni mama, a machicha. So I recall 1974, was it? The Yom Kippur War. Soviet Union was clearly on the side of the Syrians and the Egyptians, and Israel was in grave danger at the start of the Yom Kippur War. And in the Soviet radio, they were reporting so many Israeli tanks destroyed, so many planes shut down. And now I knew as a Soviet boy that my country, Soviet Union, was against Israel. And so when I heard on the news these reports of Israeli losses, I was rather excited about it, and I expressed my glee. And my father heard me. And he called me into his room. I wouldn't say his office, it was a small apartment, but it was a room where he had his desk. Oh, yeah. And he said, "Who the hell are you?" And I was really taken aback, I'm a little boy, your son. And I said, "I don't know what you mean." He said, "Who are you?" I'm like, "I don't know, Dad. Who am I?" He said, "You're Jewish." And that was the first time I ever heard him telling me that I'm Jewish.
How old were you there?
6 or 7.
6 or 7.
And I said, "Yeah, what does that mean?" He goes, "Who lives in Israel?" I said, "Israelis?" He goes, "Yes, but who are Israelis?" "I don't know. They're Jewish." And it was like a lightning strike. And that's when my Jewish identity showed itself. I'm like, oh my God, this country that I was so happy living in, turns out they hate people like me. It's like, oh my God, that was a real revelation. I thought it was kind of a shock the way my father introduced me to my Jewish identity. But after that, I started, really I started asking, what does it mean being Jewish? And of course, they did not maintain they didn't keep kosher. They didn't go to the synagogue. It was being Jewish was not a religious thing. It was just part of your ethnicity.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
In fact, in the Soviet Union, in the passports, they had line number 5, and it said your nationality. And in my
Jewish.
parents, it said Jewish.
Okay.
And the idea was actually Stalin was the head of the nationalities when the Soviet Union was formed, and they thought it would be a good way to show that Soviet Union is a multinational society, that we respect everybody's nationality, but it was actually a way to keep people from getting jobs. Like, so there were no Jews in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
There you
and there weren't any
or the aviation
in 1956 at Moscow Aviation Institute. So, I mean, anti-Semitism was pretty overt and pretty rampant. And my father was very set on getting his family the hell out of there. So I remember that. Now, I never experienced any overt anti-Semitism toward myself, but my brother, he was constantly mobbed in school.
Older brother?
He's 7 years older than me, and by that time, kids realized that there are certain minorities that we can pick on. I didn't experience, but my brother got into fights on a weekly basis. And I remember a story where my dad, of course, it's hearsay. I wasn't there. Yeah. I hear my father telling the story. Yes, I went into Edward's school. They called me in because he was fighting, and I came in there, and they were chastising him for smashing this kid's nose, and he was bleeding all over the place. And I asked him, "Edward, why did you hit the boy?" He said, "He called me a dirty kike." He said, "Oh, you didn't hit him hard enough."
That was at the school?
At the school. And so apparently the pedagogues there, directors go, "How could you say something like that?" He said, my father said, "I told him, if you allow this kind of bullshit in your school toward my son, maybe I should come and punch you in the nose." My father didn't take any slack. When it came to anti-Semitism, my father was rather, as we say in Danish, kraftige bygning. I mean, he was a weightlifter in college. He could hold his own. I mean, his legs were like tree stumps, and he just wouldn't take that kind of shit.
Were there any sort of event or principles that you've sort of extracted from that period of your life that are a piece of your identity today that you can pull some strength from, or pull some sort of judgment from, or anything like that? Especially because you've had a few times when it was just like, boom, here's a piece of your identity and some things like that.
Shit really happened. I think it taught me that there are certain principles that you can't compromise on. My father was not an easy man, but he had an incredible strength of character. He was very categorical. Once he, decided on something, he could be less than flexible. But at the same time, if he had not been that way, I don't think we would have been able to. He would have taken his family out of the Soviet Union. I mean, I have in my life emigrated 3 times, so changed countries and domicile, but it's nothing compared to what my father did. To leave your home country with a wife, 2 children, and a mother who was half an invalid, to come to another country without any job, not knowing the language, not having any network, that takes some cojones.
Yes.
I mean, really, my sons tell me, "Oh, Dad, I mean, you emigrated from United States to Denmark and you started your own business." And I'm like, it's just nothing. Your grandpa, that was a mensch, that was something. So it was kind of inspirational to me when I saw some of the difficulty I encountered. I was thinking, oh my God, what did my dad think? What was he, going into? Because when you left the Soviet Union, it wasn't see you later. It was adieu. It's farewell.
Now we're done with you.
Yeah. Well, you leave. You
not
left.
welcome back.
Not welcome back. They took away your passport. They took away your citizenship. When you left the Soviet Union, you basically were a traitor to the motherland. And in fact, when you applied for a visa to leave, you became a traitor to the motherland, and you lose your job. My parents were fired from their work.
Wow.
And the ironic thing is they didn't give us an exit visa. So we were what's called Refuseniks. So people who were refused an exit visa, and you just lost your job, right? And what saved us was my father. All his life, he had a hobby. He had an incredibly insightful sense of humor, and he was a screenwriter. That was his hobby. He would write comedy sketches for the Russian circus clowns, for television shows, but he did it, as a hobby. But once we became Refuseniks, he lost his job at the Moscow Tractor Institute. He started writing under pseudonym these comedy scripts. He made more money in the 2 years we were Refuseniks than he made the previous 20 years as an engineer.
Okay.
Wow.
I mean, it was just renovated our small apartment, bought new furniture. I mean, it was kind of ironic. The last 2 years we lived, he said, we have all this money, but there's nothing to spend on because it's not a consumer-driven economy. But you pay money and you get shit done. So, of course, he had to forget all that once he came to America because writing comedy in Russian is not the same as doing in English. And so the transition period was also quite memorable because we left the Soviet Union. The second time we applied first time we applied was to the United States.
Yeah.
They refused that visa. And the second time, 2 years later, we applied to go to Israel. And that we were granted. And basically, the way you're granted the visa, you get a little note in your mailbox. And mail was delivered twice a day. There was a morning delivery and the afternoon delivery. And I was the one who went to the mailbox to get this. And I got this notice and it says, oh, you have 30 days to leave the fuck out of the country. So sell everything that you own. It's basically like, Ferdinand and Isabella in 1492 expelling Jews from Spain. You have 3 months to leave the country or convert to Christianity. No, so there was no option of converting
Just
to anything.
Eviction notice, basically.
30 days. Now imagine in 30 days to get your what is that called? Your business in order to leave the country
to a place you've never been before.
Right, and so we managed that. We leave the country. In the process, they take away your passport, and anybody who's age 16 or older has to have an internal passport. So in the Soviet Union, there was an internal passport, and it's still that way. You have an internal passport and a external passport. We didn't have that. They took away our internal passport, and my parents had to pay for every passport holder an equivalent of 4 months' salary
What?
or what the state did for you, provided you education, health care, you have to pay back now that you're abandoning the motherland. Oh, $300 per family we were allowed to take out.
To travel with.
You couldn't
So
take it.
all the rest that was just left for the motherland.
We left to our relatives.
Okay,
you
of
know,
course. Okay.
So, and you were allowed, I think it was like 400 kilos of goods that you could take. And there was a limited number. So one wedding ring, one set of gold earrings, ridiculous, 8 silver spoons. It's like, and a partridge in a pear tree.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what my parents took as the weight. So besides, our clothes, they were allowed to like send a parcel. About a year later, when we're in Louisiana in the United States, a big crate arrives. And I'm wondering, and that's the stuff they sent. I had no idea what they sent. And they open up the crate, and I see what it is. It's my father's library. He took his books.
It's mostly his library.
No, it was only his books.
Only his books.
He
Okay.
had a passion for reading, and I inherited that from him, or I kind of
Also,
picked it up by
an
osmosis.
interesting outlook on what his principles were there as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like reading, educating, as like the top principle compared to like whatever the couch or the.
Well, it's a
Yeah.
perfect example of how Jewish people have been hounded out of the places where they lived, whether it's Spain and Portugal, whether it's England or other countries. You can't take your possessions, but what you have in your head, nobody can take that away.
Yeah, that's true.
So
That leaves me going to the whole experience, and you said it as well. That's nothing compared to what your dad have been involved in. Your dad, have you ever had a talk with him, like basically going through what was going through his mindset from when you were young to like, we're getting out of here? That you mentioned that one situation, but have he experienced and talked with you about we're getting out of here because I can sense in myself this is wrong? That whole process that's gone through, because as you mentioned, he leaves his country.
Yeah.
Where his family is, everything that he's known, but then they stab his ethnicity and holds it against him. That whole...
the thing is, I had no idea. I was a small child when he had the plans and how he went about it, but he nursed that idea for 20 years.
Okay.
From basically from 1956, and we left in 76. He nursed the idea that he was going to get out of the country. And at the time when the first thought came into his head, it was impossible. I mean, that was just unfathomable. Nobody was getting out. But that idea, that seed was born. And as time went on, it just stated itself. And the first opportunity that he saw with Nixon's visit and the Helsinki Accords, he said, now's my chance. So I can't imagine what it was like to nurture this idea that you want to get the hell out of here, and you want to take your family, and the risks that you're taking, because so many people tried to talk him out of it. I just remember that once it was clear, I remember people coming to the house. Are you sure you want to do this? And you're risking everything. And of course, in the Soviet press, the propaganda is that the West is collapsing, there's unemployment and homelessness and people in poverty and yada, yada, yada. So he was focused. He said, there's no future for me or my family in this country.
One hell of a man.
Yes. He unfortunately passed on February 14th, 2022. And he, toward the end of his life, you could tell that the difficulty of his life took a toll on him. But to the very end, he was quite lucid. I remember every time subsequent to that, after I had my career started and I would travel to the former Soviet Union, I would, when I come home, I'd give him a call, and he'd pick up the phone. I said, "Thanks, Dad." He goes, "What, you been in Russia?" Yeah, You're welcome. Got you out of there, didn't I?
Oh, yeah, I bet.
Because I was like, oh my God, I could be living in this shit. It's sort of like this old Soviet joke where these two tapeworms, a father and a son, inside of a pile of manure. They stick their head out and they're looking around, and the little baby tapeworm says to the father, Dad, look at all this. I mean, beautiful countryside, with green grass and nice forest and the sun shining. Yes, son, I see that. Dad, but why are we living in this pile of shit? It's home, son. It's like, they understand that they're living in shit. Most of them did, but
Yeah, but I mean, as we've talked about previously too, I'm also American who have moved to Denmark, but that's only been of my own free
volition,
choice. And
yeah.
Exactly. A totally other circumstance. But nonetheless, for me, that was a huge leap to take, to trust myself enough to make that move and to start a new life here and everything like that. And that's knowing where I'm going, knowing it's a good place, that I can communicate with everybody, that I can more or less land on my feet along the way. So I can only imagine what it would take to make the jump and to take that leap, also without internet and communication in the same way that we have today and everything like that.
Right. I mean, it wasn't that you could, let's Google where was the Louisiana we're going to end up. What's it like? There was,
We can just FaceTime our relatives whenever we feel lonely and learn English on Google or whatever, or YouTube.
Still, I imagine you're considered an adventuresome boy from the Midwest by your circle of friends.
That is true, generally, yeah.
So that's kudos to you.
Yeah, thanks, man. And so then from the Soviet Union, you move, you land in
Vienna.
the States.
No. There's a big transition there.
Okay.
So we're stateless. We don't have citizenship. And my father, we fly from Moscow to Vienna, and there we're given a choice. You have a visa for Israel. You can go to Israel. My dad says, no, I'm dead set on going to America. So now we become stateless refugees. And there we go through about 6-month process of vetting by the U.S. State Department or whoever is involved in the decision to grant us asylum to get to the United States. And we're in Italy. We take a train from Vienna to Rome, and the train is, this is 76, a lot of PLO terrorist attacks on targets in Europe. So our train is protected by these guys with Uzis, and they're all dressed in civilian clothes. So I don't know if it's Mossad or whoever, but there's a lot of plainclothes people with machine guns on the trains, on the train that we took. It's an overnight train.
It's an intimidating
to Rome.
thought.
Well, I actually thought it was, we're being protected.
Okay.
I really didn't give it much thought. And we end up in Rome, and there we received a small amount of money that was enough for us to rent an apartment and to stay and wait for, it was family. We're 5 people, my brother and I, my mom, dad, and my grandma, waiting for the U.S. to grant us asylum. Now, it was really interesting. So the number one country people wanted to go to was the United States. If you were ever a member of the Communist Party in the Soviet Union, and basically it's not for political ideology people joined the party. There were certain positions, economic status positions, like a director of a plant or a senior engineer. You had to be a member of the party.
You had to play the game.
United States would not give you refugee status.
Okay.
You were persona non grata if you had ever been a member of the party. Canada would. So
that's interesting.
So the second choice for people was Canada. And if you didn't go do that, the next 3 countries, and I think that's the order of preference, was South Africa.
Okay.
Australia, but Australia would only take you if you had a job already lined up.
Sure.
And then West Germany.
Okay.
And I think we're talking something like 70, 25%, and then,
Then it trickles down real fast.
So we, of course, applied for the United States, and after 5 months, we were granted asylum status. And on December 16th, 1976, we arrived at Kennedy International Airport. on an Alitalia flight from Rome.
Wow.
That was, Soviet Union, Vienna, we were there for like 5 days, Rome, and then New York City. I mean, that year, we had a lot of really exciting stuff happening for me. That's why I remember everything that happened before and after. It's like going to the moon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, New York City arriving 10 days before Christmas.
Oh,
Can you imagine what
that
Fifth Avenue looked like with the shops and it's like incredible.
And I'm super curious actually too, because you said there was such a strong propaganda machine really playing down the lives of the people in the Western countries. So you're probably like, I would imagine from your perspective, you're thinking, okay, we're going to go into like a worse place than we live now to escape some of this discrimination. And then you start seeing some of these places and you're like, okay, this is a little better than I thought.
Not exactly. So
Okay.
I understand. I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But actually, the grapevine works very well in the Soviet Union, or it did at that time. So one of the agreements, a very, very small agreement, side agreement to the treaties that were signed after Nixon came to the Soviet Union, was the exchange of magazines.
Oh, there we go.
Soviet
okay.
Life was in every American school library. It was a magazine about the wonders of Soviet life, and that was the name of the magazine, Soviet Life. It was printed on this really shitty paper, like
Okay.
like the magazine in the 30s in the United States. They weren't really glossy, but there was a magazine called America in Russian. There's this beautiful glossy magazine that was just just gorgeous photographs. And there were a limited number of copies. And if you were connected in the Soviet Union, you had one of those. You
Okay.
could get one. And people saw them. And our neighbors had one.
Ooh,
They would get one every month.
They were popular.
Yeah. People would visit them just to see the magazine. It's
Wow.
amazing. Just how behind the Soviet Union was in terms of the consumer culture. The display of pride would be hard boxes of Marlboro cigarettes, or Camel, Winston, L&M, and you'd have it on a place of honor on your mantelpiece, like sitting there, or aluminum cans of beer that, colorful, Munich Spaten or, Franziskaner or Carlsberg, because they were so colorful, because everything Soviet was, there was gray, there was black, and there was white. I remember in Louisiana, where when my father got his job there after we went to New York, we were renting an apartment, and there was another family across the landing in the apartment. And we got to know them very well, and they were just living there temporarily while their house was being built.
Okay.
And one day, we see this van pull up to the apartment building, and the guy is coming out with these samples. I later realized there were samples of wallpaper, carpeting, and curtains. And he was like in there for 2 hours. And then he walks out, and my father greets the neighbor and said, "What was that all about?" And he says, "Oh, well, we had to pick the carpeting, and it is so difficult, just all these colors and textures and styles." And my father says, "Oh, it's very simple in Soviet Union." And they go, "Well, what do you mean?" "Well, there's black and there's white. Sometimes you get gray. Very simple." Of course, he's being facetious, but there was, consumer goods were very, very limited. So, yeah.
It's such an interesting perspective, because we talked about that, about how we perceive Russia, and I could just imagine when you said that thing with the magazine, that must have been such in an era where information was essentially through newspaper or radio or television, it was so detained versus what we have today,
Right.
where you can go on the internet.
Yes.
That must have been such a funny thing to see that magazine being a place of value.
Well, I mean, pretty much everything. We as kids, we had this game where bottle caps, this metal bottle caps. Now, the Soviet bottle caps on beer or soft drink, they were just, plain color. There was no drawing. But if you look at the beer bottle caps, they're all very colorful. And so we would play these games where you had this this metal puck that you would use, and you would hit on, and if they flipped, you won. So it's like, these are the kind of things we collected. And imagine me on the train. We arrive at the station in Rome, and at that time, all the garbage from the train, from the what is it called, the diner car, they would just drop it into the railroad tracks. And I'm standing on the platform, and the railroad tracks are just covered with these beer bottle caps of all different colors. You know, I'm like, and I go on the tracks, you know, yes, for me it was treasure.
Yeah.
And my father said, what are you doing? Can't you see there's lots of this shit? It's shit because there's lots of it. There's no scarcity of it. Like, I still took a little plastic bag. I threw it out a couple of days later because I realized it was on every corner. This commodity lost its value because it was so plentiful.
That's interesting. And then you land in Louisiana.
Oh, but first New York. And my
New York.
father was an agricultural engineer and quite an accomplished one. He had over 40 world patents. And so we get, while we're in Italy, and they said, oh, yeah, congratulations, we're going to send you to America. I said, whatever you do, don't send me to New York. No good, New York City, agricultural engineer. You know, Park Avenue, you can't plow it, Central Park either. Yeah. They sent us to New York. And so at that time, it was really interesting. Every Monday morning, they would sell, there were a number of newspaper kiosks that you could purchase the Sunday edition of newspapers from LA Times to New Orleans Picoin, the Chicago Tribune. There are Sunday editions which contained want ads, job advertisements. And so my father would go to this one kiosk next to our flat that we rented, and he would buy these stacks and stacks of these newspapers, and he would just sit all week, go through them, find, and would send out his resume. Now
that was the LinkedIn at the time.
Basically, and because, now, a really interesting thing about my dad. While we were in Italy, a lot of people we were there for almost half a year. We were living not in Rome, but in Ostia, which is on the coast. Mm-hmm. It was cheaper to rent an apartment there than in the city, but it's on the coast. There's beaches there. And all the other emigres, wannabe refugees, they go to the beach. My father, every single day, 8 hours a day, he would sit and learn English. He said, and people would say to him, you get to the States, you learn English then. He goes, I don't have time for that. I need to be ready. I need to hit the ground running. So he would send out his resumes, and of course he, the Soviet emigre engineer. What the hell is that? An unknown entity. 40 world patents with the number of the patent, description, brief description, and of course they can check it, and it has his name on it, either as an author or co-author. And he got
that's impressive.
He got his job within 3 months in Louisiana for Thompson Equipment Company, and he designed a sugarcane harvester for them within 6 months. They paid him in obscenely low salary because, again, unknown entity. But within 6 months, he got a job with a 70% price, a salary hike in South Bend, Indiana. And then after 6 months, we moved to the Midwest. So
okay.
And he moved around one more time to Illinois, and then we ended up in Madison, Wisconsin in 1980. And that's where my formative years in the United States were spent, in Madison, Wisconsin.
And how old were you approximately?
10. Oh, sorry. High school. Started high school. I was 13.
Okay. Very cool. And of course, it's been exciting for me to connect with you on the Madison, Wisconsin, because I'm of course from Wisconsin and grew up 40 minutes away from Madison at the time. What is there anything you miss from Wisconsin from now that being over in Denmark, or anything that you thought was kind of funny or different there compared to Denmark or anywhere else?
I know you want me to say brats, cheese curds. And
that was my next. I'm like, I know if I say fried cheese curds, you're going to know what that means. Only people from Wisconsin will know that one.
I have Wisconsin very deep in me. I think the place where you spend your formative years, high school, university, plus I'm still very much connected to Madison, Wisconsin. while at the University of Wisconsin in 1988, I won a scholarship to study at the University of Oslo through this phenomenal program called the Brittingham Viking Organization, which initially started as a wealthy industrialist from Wisconsin who wanted to introduce Scandinavians to the beauty of capitalism.
Okay.
Because he thought after World War II, Scandinavians were getting too socialist. And he invited 2 from Finland, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark for a full 1-year scholarship at UW. And then those people started a reverse scholarship where they wanted to show Americans from University of Wisconsin what a wonderful place Scandinavia is.
Yeah,
so this scholarship has been ongoing since 1952, and I've been very much involved with the organization, even though I was there as a scholar in Scandinavia in 1988. A lot of people stick with it, and we help finance and support the organization, which every year sends 4 Americans to Scandinavia.
Okay.
And 4 Scandinavians from the 4 Scandinavian countries to University of Wisconsin-Madison. So
That's
every
great.
5th year we have a convention in Madison, and then it rotates. So every 5th year it's in Copenhagen, Finland, Sweden, Norway. So I'm still very much connected to my Scony land. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Now you said that there's still a lot of medicine that lives in you, and you're a very, very well-traveled man. Is there different homes for you, or is there one home that just resonates with you?
Well, I think some people they reach a certain level of wealth and they feel that they need to have a house in Aspen, in the Keys, in Spain. No, there can only be one home.
Yeah,
and that's where you are with your family. I feel at home anywhere in the United States. I feel at home in Mexico, where I speak the language. I went to university in Mexico. I feel very comfortable there. But home is Denmark.
Okay.
Every time, and I travel a lot. I really enjoy travel because I love the exposure to different cultures, to be able to practice the languages that I speak, and to meet new people, experience the wonders of nature, and from the anthropological standpoint. But every time I come to Denmark, I'm like, it's so wonderful to be home.
Yeah.
I think Denmark is perfect is the enemy of good, and it's not perfect, but it comes pretty damn close compared to everything else.
Yeah. I've also that's been my experience as well. I've noticed when I've been speaking with Danish people who, when they're being critical of Denmark and maybe some of the issues facing the Danish government today, as people should, and when I listen to that, sometimes I think, man, if these were like the top problems of the United States of America, like that would be pretty okay.
Say hallelujah, praise the
yeah,
Lord.
that would be okay.
Yeah,
because like you say, it's not perfect, certainly, but it is quite good. It is quite good.
I think all we have to do is look at the nightly news in Denmark and look at what is the problem of the day.
Yeah.
Like, not another mass shooting, the homeless problem, the fentanyl issue. I mean, just like all
student loans.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. So after spending all of that time in the States, how many years were you in the U.S.?
15.
And 15, and how long have you been in Denmark?
It'll be 33 years in July 6th.
Okay. And how has those two experiences just really expanded your worldview overall? What advantages or what extra experience do you have from that worldview compared to someone who have never left their own country, perhaps?
Yeah, feel sorry for those people. Because I think first of all, it enriches you. It enriches you in the sense that you can juxtapose and compare. And there are some things that we do fantastically well in the United States, which I wish the Danes would take on. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of things Danes do super well that I wish Americans would get wrap their minds around. But at the very least, you know what they are. Yeah. You become aware that, wow, we could do things differently. And you can improve on things by having that experience. So, and that's one of the things I really enjoy about traveling. I'm like, oh, they do it this way here. I like that. Wouldn't it be interesting to introduce that concept where I live? A lot of business ideas come from that. How they, process a product, how they interact on certain things. During the course of our discussion today, I'm sure I'll come up with something. I just need to plant that seed, and it'll come to me.
Sure. Yeah.
That brings me to that you speak 5 languages fluently, and then there's something about Italian as well, which is the 6th language, right? And what?
Well, actually, Italian is the 5th. The 6th is the French, which I don't practice so much.
That's how it is.
So let's put a qualifier. I feel that I speak 2 languages absolutely well.
Yeah.
Like native. That's English and Russian.
Yes.
I feel incredibly comfortable in Danish and Spanish. My Italian, I won't say fluently.
Okay.
Because if you give me a Neapolitan accent, I can't make heads or tails of it. So how did I start with Italian? We can thank Donald Trump for that.
Okay, here we go. This one goes out to Donald Trump. Thank you.
After he was elected, I just said, "Oh my God, this shit show! We're trying to show the British, hold my beer, let me show you how to fuck things up." So when he became president, or got elected, wasn't yet inaugurated. I was so frustrated that reading the news, I would get sick. I mean, I feel sick just reading the news and just hearing another of his quotes or commentary. So I said, okay, I need to refocus my energy on something constructive.
Okay.
And let's put that energy to peaceful purposes. And we had been planning, so this was in November he was elected, and we had been planning to go to Italy with my family. We rented a house there. I said, I really enjoy being in a country, being able to speak the language.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, why don't I learn Italian? And so every time I had the urge to read the news, I would do an Italian lesson. There were days where I'd do 3 hours of Italian lessons. Now, this was self-directed study, but because I speak Spanish and know French, it became easier and easier. And then I started listening to podcasts, and there are a shitload of material out there that allows from beginner to far advanced. And I listen to far advanced. I listen to Italian radio podcasts now.
Okay.
And this was 6-7 years ago that I started on this journey. So it was very gratifying 9 months later to fly into Italy, go rent a car, and to speak Italian at the agency, drive to the house and go to the shop and order the coffee. And it was really nice because as I was studying, I would listen to the podcast and I would do the transcripts and I would write things down. So I was sitting at the kitchen table and I had this really thick notebooks just filled with writing in Italian. And it kind of demonstrated to my youngest son and then my oldest sons when they were visiting that Dad is focused on this.
Mm-hmm.
Because that to me was my father. Because an example with my father was he decided in the Soviet Union, the most difficult books to obtain were art books. So real good quality books with art pictures. It was my father had like 3 of them, and that was just like prized possessions.
Okay.
And then he gets to the United States, and there's this Time Life books. Every month, we'll send you, this huge book on Cézanne, Van Gogh, Goya, El Greco, the great artists of Western civilization. And every month, he would get this book, and he would sit down in the evening, and he would religiously read it, and he would speak it. He would he would read it out loud because that he felt that would help his English. And until that book was finished, he wouldn't start the next one. So he's always trying to, within a month, finish the book because the next one. There are 24 books in that series. I inherited them from my dad. So I wanted, and it showed me this commitment, and I wanted to do that same thing with the language. And then when we got to Italy, I was able to communicate. Of course, it was kind of basic and...
but that was just really cool that it's not just the principle of how focused work gets results, and training this discipline of focus, but in actually the precise same way, actually, sitting down and studying a language
Right.
for both of you in both generations. That's actually pretty cool.
I mean, for my dad, English was a struggle to the very end. From the linguistic perspective, if you are exposed to a language before the age of, I think the border is 13, you can speak fluently. Your
Like
ear,
a mother tongue.
right?
Yeah.
For my father, who emigrated, he was 41 when he came to the United
A
States.
little past 13.
It was very difficult. The accent was still there, and this typical Russian accent pursued him till the end of his life, which is perfectly okay. I mean, for me, an accent means someone who has overcome obstacles.
Yeah, exactly. I feel the exact same way when I hear someone speaking Danish, but with an American
Why
accent.
is he looking at
Yeah,
me now?
but with an American
He likes to
accent.
tease me on my American accent. And
I'm just like, fuck yeah,
That's
because
effort.
you're doing something here,
Right.
and that's the step that most people never go across.
Well, I mean, when people express prejudice against people who speak with an accent, I'm often like, do you know how many languages that person speaks?
Yeah,
Somebody coming from Pakistan, they probably speak at least 4 languages.
yeah,
They speak Urdu. They might, obviously speak a bit of English, and in some of the other languages maybe in Farsi, like. Just because we don't speak it in this country, there are millions, tens of, if not more, millions of people who speak that language. So I have a lot of respect for people who speak with an accent. They are overcoming obstacles.
Yeah.
definitely. So you start out by learning Russian, then you move to the States.
Yeah, that was an easy one. That was
Yeah,
kinda-
that was an
kinda
easy
boring,
one, right?
but,
that was the default.
Then you go to the States and you also enroll in high school.
No, it's so I'm 10 years old, and they dropped me 5th grade in Thibodaux, Louisiana. And we ain't never seen no Russians before. y'all got televisions over there? Like, you ever seen a telephone? Oh my God, we're not like bears from the Siberian, forest. It was an experience. I mean, it was very difficult. But again, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, after 6 months in the United States, I could communicate.
Okay.
And after a year, I think I was caught up to my contemporaries. And it's not because I'm anything special. It's just that the brain is so plastic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And my parents had a rule. And thanks to them, another thing that I'm really grateful for, I speak fluent Russian. And I speak on a very high level, and I read Russian. I sing in Russian, not very well, but they enforce the policy: outside of house, you're American. You speak English. In house, we only speak Russian. And they would ignore me. And as a teenager, you're like, also, if we're in the store, they'll be speaking Russian to me. I'm like, who are these people? I'm so embarrassed. And I actually, with my youngest son, because his mother is from Russia, and we speak, our lingua franca at home is Russian.
Okay.
And I always told him, and he got it pretty quickly because he was exposed to a lot of friends. We have friends living in Switzerland. Their lingua franca is French, but when the kids are together, it's Russian. We have friends in Spain. Their lingua franca is Spanish, but when they're together, it's Russian. So the kids, he has friends from all over the world, Russian families, they maintain the Russian, so he can communicate with them. And he can pick up the Spanish and the French. And so my parents insisted that at home we only spoke Russian. So I had that as a gift because I know a lot of contemporaries who left at the same age as I did. Their Russian is worthless. I mean, they can understand, they can't speak it. It's a gift that was just pissed away.
Yeah, I was just about to say, because that being multilingual, that really is a gift that has so much more value than people actually give it credit for.
Oh, you think in a different way.
Yeah.
I mean, just the genders of the language and how the adjectives are formed and where they're placed. There's a lot of neuro research that shows exposure to languages. Actually, the best way to stave off Alzheimer's and dementia is to learn another language. Because our brain is plastic. If one part of the brain, gets clogged up, it switches to other parts. Well, if they're not exercised, there's nothing to switch to.
Yeah.
There's actually a fantastic TED talk about this. It was a professor, she's Italian, who studies Alzheimer's, talks about how, signore, per lei è più buonissimo imparare italiano to avoid Alzheimer's,
There you go.
Yeah.
And then from your Louisiana experience, you go to high school, and then you go to Norway. Is that in the high school?
No, that's in college. So
that's in college.
We kind of skipped Indiana and Illinois. We end up in Madison. I start high school, and I go to Madison West High School, smack in the middle of Madison, Wisconsin. Fantastic high school. Great education. Very rich neighborhood, so the school has a lot of resources.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a swimming pool, so we have a men's and women's swim team, men's and women's golf team, a tennis team, hockey team. We only at that time it was only boys hockey team. Basketball, American football, soccer. So in America, that's expensive. That's a lot of facilities and coaches. But it was a very wealthy school, and I got a fantastic education. I was very fortunate. I had a Spanish teacher, Señor Zintel. We called him El Corbata, the tie, because he wore craziest ties. And I've connected with him subsequently. And another teacher who later divorced and changed her name, but I knew her as Mrs. Dowling, who's my literature teacher. She was brilliant. They really instilled the love of the subject that they taught in me, and I'm very grateful to them. But one of the most useful things I learned was my teacher. Her name was Mrs. Jensen, and she was, I didn't know at the time, but she's a typical Danish blonde.
Okay.
And she probably was of Danish heritage because it's spelled S-E-N.
Okay, sure.
She taught me typing. Typing. It was a typing class. At that time we had the IBM Selectric typewriters, and I could type 120 words a minute, which basically when I'm on a computer, I type and people look at me like, how does he do that? It's like, why is he not the... But that was a great skill. And she also taught me another very, very important skill, which you don't expect to learn in typing, listening.
Okay.
She said, if you want people to consider you great to be a great conversationalist, ask questions and listen to the answer.
That's interesting for that period of time.
Yeah.
Because that's something that we've talked about before with our own parents, that communication and expressing your emotions and communicating that in a well thought out way was not really those generations.
No. But she really emphasized that. And you think, why in typing class? But she would just throw out these nuggets of advice, and she was incredibly attractive. So I listened.
Teacher crush?
Not a perverse way. I just thought she was just an incredibly pleasant person, and I learned in her class. So along the way, I've had many such professors and teachers who made an indelible impression on me. So I have a tremendous respect for pedagogues, for educators.
Yeah.
My youngest son studied at the Royal Ballet School, and I am so incredibly grateful to the pedagogues, both from the ballet side and the academic side, who taught him. He also studied piano, and his piano teacher, Yulia, for 10 years, she taught him piano, and his level, improved to a certain point, which said, actually, Philip, you need, and she's a great pianist, said you need someone, to give you more challenging stuff. But she was so good and so nurturing from the very beginning. Because it's not easy to do a musical instrument and to want to do it.
It's almost like another language, actually.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, because the language of music, and so my youngest son, he speaks 3 languages fluently plus piano, so maybe 4. Oh, and the language of dance, so that's 5.
Yeah,
There
that's
you
also
go.
go,
Physical
yeah.
language.
A
yeah.
total other way of expression. Yeah.
And then you're in college now, and you also had a semester in Mexico.
Right.
How did that happen?
Well, so when I got to college, I wanted to be an Air Force officer. I wanted to...
There we go.
I want to be an airborne ranger. No, I wanted to be a flyboy. I wanted to... Top Gun had not yet come out.
Yeah.
Oh, it had not yet come out?
No, it was 84, and Top Gun came out in 86, I think.
Was that something you also got from your father? Because you said that was something he also...
No, not really.
Or was that in a
because
different way?
Yeah.
Okay,
You know,
just,
one thing is designing aircraft avionics,
Sure.
engineering, and another thing is being a flyboy. So I joined ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps, and I started, said, okay, well, in the United States, to be an officer, you have to have a university degree.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't really matter what degree you got. So I said, okay, I'm going to be Air Force officer. Let's do what I like, biology. I love biology. I think, you know, the study of life, the science of life is just so interesting. It's just so captivated me. And then after a year, they told me, well, I did an eye test, and I had a stigmatism in my left eye. They said, oh, you can be a navigator. I'm like, no, I'm not doing
Not what
that.
I signed up for.
I'm not going to sit in the back, you know, like, no. So I quit that. But then, of course, I needed to get a degree in something that I, you know, could maybe get a job. So I started history. And my father said, what, you're going to be historian? And so what I did was I started a triple major. I ended up with a triple major in Spanish, international relations, and history. And it might sound like a lot, but actually they're overlapping.
Yeah.
So you studied the history of Central America. Oh, that goes for your history degree, international relations, and Spanish. You know, it's
That's a good
trifecta.
synergy.
Yeah. I mean, there's huge overlap. And I also, when I started college, I said, well, I've done my Spanish. It was great. Now I'm going to study French. And French was going really well because it's very easy. The grammar is the same as Spanish and the same as Italian. And a lot of vocabulary. And there's a huge number of French words in the Russian language.
Okay.
Because the Russian aristocracy was very much influenced by the French, as was every aristocracy. It was the lingua franca of the nobility and the aristocracy. So there was a lot of French words. Pronunciation was really good. I can do the because those are letters in the Russian language. You know, the sh, the ch. And at the same time, I had this girlfriend who went to Denmark, of all places. And she was living with a family, and she in the family there was a boy named Søren, and then a couple of months later I got a Dear John letter.
No.
In case you don't, you do know what a Dear John letter is, but just in case you don't know, for your studio audience, a soldier goes off to war and writes his girlfriend back home, and then she writes him a letter, Dear John, I'm sorry to tell you, but found somebody else. And so I was kind of like...
The equivalent of the breakup text.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, well, now you can do an emoji. Breakup emoji. So I was like, she's going to come back here, and I don't want to be here when she's here. And then my Spanish is really getting rusty. And so there was this program with a UW affiliate school, University of Wisconsin affiliate school in Mexico. And I said, what a great opportunity. So I went for a semester to study at University of the Americas, La Universidad de las Américas, in Puebla, Cholula, Mexico. And I went there, I studied for a semester, and really got my Spanish down. And I was very fortunate to be selected, or chosen for the La Selección de Fútbol, the varsity football team. There were 22 players chosen. I was number 22.
All right.
The last one.
Yeah.
Because the trainer said, Ilya, you are very, very dedicated. You know, you come to every practice 15 minutes before, you leave 15 minutes after, you help me collect all the balls. I want your... I was probably one of the biggest players because, you know, Mexican players are a little smaller.
Okay.
And so I think he just wanted me as the intimidator, you know. I won't say that I played well. But I really enjoyed myself. I enjoyed the shit out of it.
Yeah.
Traveling with the team, you know, telling jokes, and the camaraderie was fantastic. The esprit de corps. I was, you know, I trained hard. I helped the others. I was accepted. Most people, most countries, when you show respect for their culture and their language and appreciation for, you know, their country, they will open up their arms to you.
Yeah.
They really like the fact that this Guerro, this Rubio, they had a nickname for me, Blochin, which was a Russian player who at that time played for Real Madrid. He was blonde, you know, block of a guy. Boris Becker, they called me. Boris. Because I was red-haired. They said, Boris.
Boris Becker.
No soy Boris, soy Ilya, cabrón. But... So it was great time, really, really great time. We traveled around the country, you know, the away games, and I took every opportunity to travel, and I still maintain a very close relationship with students I went to university with. In fact, in October I was in Guanajuato, which is just north of Mexico City, visiting one of my friends and her husband with my wife from the time when I studied at the university in Mexico. So it was great time.
That's really
admirable.
Cool. Yeah, and I think you also touched on a really interesting principle there too, which is even if you're number 22 out of a team of 22 and you're not necessarily the best player on the team, there are still so many roles that each player can create value for on the team. So like you said, you weren't player number one necessarily.
Scored 4 goals.
All right.
I mean,
there you go.
I think it's like, you know, when they have this 9-year-old go on the field and they put him right in front of a goal and they say, kick the ball. No, it wasn't that, but I scored 4 goals. I was like,
yeah, but there you go.
Lucky.
But nonetheless, you still were you were able to be that supporting role in the team where you mentioned some things like bringing the team together, helping get the balls afterwards, like just keeping that discipline going on the team to keep the bar raised, which would also influence the other players to become better themselves. And and I'm sure that's something that can also translate into business as well.
Well, a good coach can see which players, they might be stars, but they're egocentric, and they'll never be, and it is a team sport. And then there are players who add value just by being there. Well, we all seen Ted Lasso, right? You haven't? You look surprised. No, but it's a good coach will create a dynamic. He'll pick the players who will fit, and you're absolutely right. In business, you don't want too many stars, but you also don't want just vanilla average. Yeah,
that's true. And then you go on this in Mexico, and then you go back to Madison.
I come back, and I'm like, shit, that was fun being out of the country. What's the next thing I can do?
Yeah.
And I see this scholarship, the Brittingham Viking Scholarship. Come study in Scandinavia, all expense paid, scholarship and travel.
Sounds pretty good.
I'm like, wow, free. I'm a college student. I'm paying for my own education. It's a lot cheaper at that time than it is now. I think our annual tuition was like $5,000 in state. Which was very, very reasonable. I mean, with Pell Grants, student loans, and work study, you could make it. Anyway, so I applied for the scholarship on the very last day of the deadline, and I go through 2 interview processes, and my partner Eric and I are chosen for it, and we go off to Norway. Great time. Incredibly welcoming people. Norwegians are really a lot of fun, except you have to get used to that when they talk once in a while, they go, they do that. They talk and they go, yeah. And the first time I heard it, I thought, oh my God, is he having a stroke? But that's the way.
I've had my own experience. I know exactly what you're talking about.
But I tell you, salt of the earth, some of the most wonderful people. And I had the opportunity to travel in Scandinavia. I met Swedes and Finns and Danes. And when I was in Denmark, I met my now ex-wife, Vibeke, but wonderful person. I mean, and we kind of connected right away. And she moved after the scholarship. I came back, and she moved to the States, and we got married very, very quickly. Because you can't get a work permit otherwise. She woke me up at 3 o'clock in the morning and said, I know how I can get a work permit. I'm like, what, work around is like a friend, a lawyer? I mean, no, we can get married. So we eloped. I don't think my father, he eventually forgave me for it, but it was like, I wanted to have wedding. I'm like, yeah, we can still do that, Dad, but, it's like... So 2 years in the States, and the economy is in the shits. 1991, actually already in 1990, it's like I speak at that point 4 languages. I have experience with international trade. I have degrees in things that should take me out of and I'm in Midwest. Yeah. I'm like, I can't do this.
Not necessarily the international business capital of the world.
No, it's not the international business hub.
But I am actually a little curious. What have you done up to this point in your career?
Sure. So my father, who all his life worked for somebody in the agricultural sector, in 1985, Gorbachev comes to power. Becomes the general secretary of the Communist Party, and he realizes the economy's in the shits. The agricultural sector's in the shits. The consumer sector's even worse, if it can get any worse. And he introduces glasnost, perestroika, and perestroika means rebuilding or restructuring, reconstruction. And one of the things he wants to focus on is reconstruction is the agricultural sector, which basically in the Soviet Union, if somebody became the Minister of Agriculture, that means they're on the way out. Okay. Because it was like, it
was like that. Huh?
Yeah, it was, it never succeeded. Command economy a planned economy in that sector doesn't work. You can't plan for these things. You should have market forces dictate. And so what they do is there are 15 republics in the Soviet Union, and they create Russian agro-industrial complex, Belarusian, Rusagroprom, Belagroprom, Ukragroprom. My father still has a very large network of contacts through his work in the Moscow Tractor Institute, where he was a designer, researcher, inventor. And he now has developed a network in the United States of agricultural equipment machinery. And so he looks at what do they need over there, and they need everything. So he says, okay, I'm going to focus on dairy genetics. So just to give you an example, at that time, you take an average Russian cow with its genetical structure and the feed that it was getting, and it was producing maybe an average of 3,000 liters a year of milk during the third lactation, which is the most prolific lactation. So usually first lactation, first time it has a heifer, second lactation, third lactation is the one that has the most. So it's producing 3,000 liters. An average American cow was doing 10,000 liters. Same cow, same feeding, same infrastructure costs, 3 times more milk.
Yeah.
Well, it's genetics, it's how you treat the animal, it is how you feed the animal. So he said, okay, I'm going to focus on that. And in Madison, Wisconsin, there's a company called ABS, American Breeder Service. Mm-hmm. So they sell genetics all over the world, both for dairy and beef industry. So he contacts them and says, hey, do you guys do anything in the Soviet Union? They said, yeah, but do they have any money? So he connects with the people there, and they say, we don't have any money, but we have cattle hides, pig skins, citric acid, casein, caseinate, non-ferrous metal, barter. But, company that sells bull semen doesn't want aluminum ingots. So my father comes to me and says, you have to find who wants to buy citric acid in this country, because I've got, and it gives me a description and some samples. So I just, start from
Selling.
scratch, finding who the hell uses citric acid, or who the hell buys cattle hides, or this and that. So I start.
How old were you at this point?
So this is 85, so I'm 19.
Okay, so it's as you're just entering university,
19,
or
yeah,
at the beginning of the college career,
right.
and then this on the side.
So my father's doing this. So at the same time, I'm helping him with this, and delegations are coming in from the Soviet Union, because they need to inspect. Basically, it's a boondoggle, a chance for them to get a trip to the United States to inspect equipment. And so I'm traveling with them all over the United States. And so one really memorable, two memorable things. They're incredibly male chauvinistic. So we're driving. I got this big van, one of those 12 people vans, the maximum that with my driver's license I'm allowed to drive. And it's full of these people from the Soviet delegation. And we're driving on the highway, and the car passes us, and there's this lady behind the wheel. Oh, look, woman driving car. and I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, that's very common. Really? You have women driving car? Of course, we're speaking Russian. And I'm like, boy, this is like backward.
Yeah, totally other universe.
So and the other scene that's really memorable for me, so there were two companies that we represented in genetics. One was in California, Worldwide Sires, WWS, and the ABS, American Breeder Service in Madison, Wisconsin. And so I'm in California with this delegation, very top level. So the head veterinary of the Russian Ministry of Agriculture, yada, yada. And we're at this farm, and there's like 7 members of the Russian delegation. And this farmer shows us, the facilities, the calving house, the dairy milking equipment, processing equipment. And then they invite us in their home. And in the home, the wife has made like these 2 gorgeous apple pies with vanilla ice cream. And, they're serving and coffee, and they got tea just for them. They had the Folgers can and, coffee. And then they had, black tea. And I call over my colleague from WWS. I'm like, Dale, listen, I don't understand something. So what's up? So I always thought that farmers were incredibly conservative in their political outlooks. Because, these are Soviets, right? And they are treating them. They're so welcoming. They're so hospitable. I mean, I'm really happy to see this, but I'm surprised. Because, Ilya, you got to understand something about a life of a dairy farmer. They get up every morning at 4 o'clock for the 4:30 milking. That's the first milking. The second milking is between 1 and 2. They can't leave their herd to go on vacation. When the world comes to them, it's like an opportunity to meet people from around the world.
Oh, okay.
It was so insightful for me. So those are like 2 women driving and welcome. Yeah. So
the vacation visitors.
So that was my experience. Traveling with delegate, and of course I had all these business cards. I had this whole network of people in the Soviet Union at the time, and I had a lot of experience sourcing products and selling all kinds of commodities. And so 91, we moved to Denmark, and I got triple bachelor in history, Spanish, and international relations, with minors in political science and economics. What the hell does that mean? But I don't speak any Danish.
No.
And I can't get a job if my life depended on it. I mean, I'm sending out resumes and nothing. Finally, I get a breakthrough. I get invited for some Danish companies that are opening offices in Moscow. And I'm like, I'm perfect. I speak fluent Russian. I know the culture. I'm Western educated, Western minded. I have a network. I go through 3-4 interviews.
It was written for you.
They're like, thank you, and they hire a Dane just out of college, doesn't speak Russian, but it's a known entity to Danish companies.
Yeah.
So while I'm looking for work, I'm a friend of mine, a member of the Viking organization, who actually introduced me to my wife, my first wife.
Okay.
he has a warehouse. He has a paper company, and he says, "Look, I know you're overqualified, but if you want to work," I was like, "Yes, I want to work.
Yeah.
But I can't sit on my ass and twiddle my thumbs.
No.
So I have to go to work every day." And he says, "Well, you'll be a warehouse worker, delivery driver. We need to paint this and strip paint there, and this wall needs some straightening out." So I became a bricklayer. Like, well, how do you do that? Well, read. So I did that for 9 months, and then I met my business partner, whom I've been very close friends and business partner with.
What is his name?
His name is Peter Kolos. Peter is a serial entrepreneur, incredible idea generator. In fact, we made a very good team because he would generate all these ideas, and I would say, okay, 90% of them are shit. About 10% of we were. I was the sweeper. I would help him deselect. And in '92, we started our company, which was to sell food products to the former Soviet Union. Because in August 91, Soviet Union, they had the big putsch. And by January 1st, 92, there was no more Soviet Union. There was Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and the other independent states. So we started, Peter would source food products. He had already established with his father a company that was involved in food trading. And I would find buyers in Russia and also suppliers of commodities, because they didn't have money. But
so it was always a trade, something for something else. Then that something else, you would have to go out and find a buyer for that had money.
Yeah, the best business that we had, we found a partner. Actually, my father introduced me to him. My father, by that point, was already very well established selling equipment to Russia. He was the first one to sell popcorn equipment to Russia.
Okay.
I mean, really, the first, these things you see in movie theaters, the standalone. My dad was the first one to do this.
Okay.
And so he, one day, somebody from Kiev, from Ukraine, contacted him and said, "Oh, we seen you have this. Can we have that in Kiev?" And so he introduced me to these young guys, very industrious entrepreneurs. And they said to me, "Well, we have a small trucking company. We kind of inherited it. Somebody owed us money, and they gave us. So we've got these 3 tractors and 3 trailers, dry cargo." I said, "And?" He said, "Well, we have some non-ferrous metal." I'm like, "What is that?" So that's basically nickel, not iron. So ferro is iron, non-ferrous metal is nickel, aluminum, copper, tin. So things that they're much more valuable than iron. So we have them, and we can take them to Europe, and on the way back, we need some Beck's beer. Can you find us some Beck's beer? I said, okay, first I need to sell this shit.
3 truckloads.
So I'm very fortunate. Because of this network through the Viking Scholarship, I contact one of a retired commodity traders who went to University of Wisconsin on this scholarship in 1954.
Okay.
Hans Hogel. Hans, he was a brilliant man, God rest his soul, incredibly hospitable and welcoming. And he said, "Ilya, I'll help you." So he starts teaching me about how trading commodities. He says, "Well, if you want to do with non-ferrous metals, you need to fix the price on an LME, London Metal Exchange, and you need to deliver to Aachen, which is in the Ruhr. There, I know a guy who can take it. We'll fix the price on delivery, so we can give you the range what it is now, but we can't fix the price until the truck actually arrives.
Yeah.
Because you don't know if they will arrive, and if it doesn't arrive, you're going to have to supply, and of course there's a discount. Anyway, business was great. We made money on the aluminum. We made money on the Beck's beer. The trucks ran loaded both ways. Everybody was happy. I mean, it was just such a brilliant business. And so we start our company in '92, and we're shoveling money. It's going.
That's a good business.
Really good.
Yeah.
I am finally this 9 months of working in a warehouse. Now it's paying off. And then, at the end of December '92, in Russia, they announced that starting from January 1, the only way you can take non-ferrous metal out of Russia, you need to have an export license. And people would kill for these licenses. There was a very limited number. And my friend from Ukraine, he says, there's no way I'm going to get this license.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, people actually were murdered for
literally killed.
Literally. I'm not,
Literally.
not figuratively, like a brain on the sidewalk. And he said, I don't want to be in this business. And I'm like, holy shit.
That's a little intense.
And this was like 90% of our business. I'm
Oh.
like, so I said, so what are you how are you gonna generate money? He goes, well, what else can you buy? And that's when all the experience of cattle hides, pig skins, casein, citric acid, all the other kind of stuff, scrap metal you could take out.
Okay.
And this is when all of a sudden we get truckloads of wire. And I'm asking, where did this wire come from? Because it looked like it's been snapped off a power line.
Yeah.
And I said to him, don't. I mean, I don't want to be involved in that. Because one time a trailer load of aluminum canoes arrives. I'm like, did you rob a summer camp? Because I had nothing to do with it. It was a delivery to us. We're just passing it on.
And they weren't like old rusty.
They look damn new. I mean, they look
straight
like,
off the supply truck going a different direction.
I mean, at one point we would get apple juice, concentrate, honey, eggs, fresh eggs from Moldova. We would get. We'd send them to Poland, and they would make egg powder out of it.
Okay.
Because it was, the thing is, it was selling much cheaper. There was an imbalance in the currency. We were arbitraging it because it's not like today. You can't make much money on arbitrage. It's huge arbitrage opportunities on money because they hadn't started the new currencies yet. It was this transitional period. It was very interesting, and I did this until 2000. And we went through huge ups and downs.
And now you mean because the price of, for example, eggs in one country versus another
in
is
their
just
currency,
totally
currency. Right.
So then, just by making that quick transfer,
Right.
you could just make
Right.
shovel the money, as
Right.
you say, right?
Exactly. So it was a time of opportunity. So let me give you an idea. If you were a trader, a food trader in Western Europe, working with Western Europe, you could make 4 or 5% margins. We were making 20, 25% margins.
Jesus.
But we were
Okay.
taking huge risks because, if you give credit, you might not get paid.
Yeah.
So you'd have to sell 4 trucks to make up for the loss of 1 truck.
Yeah.
But in Europe, different payment terms. So there was a lot of nuance to dealing with Russia. It's who you could trust. And in 98, we got really hurt. In 98, Russia devalued its currency. There was a collapse of the Russian ruble, 6-fold devaluation. So our customers couldn't pay us.
Okay.
But so my job was we're out $5 million, right? And that's
Okay, so
that
that
was
level of
bad.
credit.
That was bad.
Yeah.
And so I'm in Moscow like every week because they have some money, and they do want to, when this crisis is over, continue doing business. My job was to convince them, with the little money you have, pay me,
Yeah.
Okay.
not the 7 other suppliers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, some might say, well, that's not fair. Well, you know what? The alternative, nobody would get paid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would promise them that I would continue doing business with them. So it was very much relationship building.
Is that one of your skills?
Yeah, very quick to answer that. I think so. I think trust is very, very important. I think the most important asset that I have is my resume. I would rather lose money than lose my resume.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had situations where I would say, you know what, we're going to take a loss on this, but it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Because in the long run, it always pays back.
Yeah.
You might think that, short-term gain, will get you. All it'll get you is short-term gain.
Yeah.
I've had situations where, we would sell all kinds of frozen products. I would source hake from Peru, I would source fish from South Africa. I was in South Korea very often for surimi crab sticks. We'd buy pork from Brazil and beef from Canada. So all over the world. So mackerel, the word for the Latin word, so you had to learn the name of the Latin words for fish. So the Latin name for mackerel is scombur scombrus. Okay? And in Russian it's called skumbria, which is very easy, right?
Yeah.
Very close.
So then there's another fish called horse mackerel, which is not mackerel at all. You use it for cat food, basically.
Okay.
So I am sending out fax of price list to one of my regular customers, and he says, Ilya, your mackerel is too high. I'm like, well, based on what? So you know that I'm making money, and I'm making maybe $100 on a ton, and I'm charging you, $1,200 a ton, so I'm making less than 10% here. What are you being offered? Well, I'm being offered for $800 a ton. I'm saying impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, there's, it's basically like buying on Alibaba something, what is it called? Very expensive clothing for half price.
Some like name brand.
Right. Yeah. Like a
probably not.
Montclair jacket for half price.
Sure.
So I'm saying to him, it's impossible. He goes, well, here. So he sends me the price list, and it says horse mackerel.
Yeah.
Which is already $300 overpriced. It would be $500 a ton. And I'm like, it's not skumbria. He goes, what do you mean? It says horse mackerel. I said, it's not the same fish. I said, what did you think it was? Well, I figured horse mackerel was just a big mackerel. Like a horse, a big one. I'm like, no, I don't think so. So I would I would guide them, and I would say to them, you know what?
So that would be like the Alibaba. Then you get
and I would say, you know what? It's a good price. It is better than my price, but I can't match it. But please be careful, because with me, if you get screwed, I mean, if it's a reefer container, it's refrigerated goods, anything can happen. The genset breaks down on the way, whatever. The truck driver forgets to turn it on, or at loading, somebody steals it. We had like half a container full stolen in South Africa. Because we found out the seal was different when it arrived. And so the guy calls me, and it's like people would, starting out in business, it's their last money. He calls me like in a panic, and Ilya, the truck half arrived. I said, no problem. I'm going to have an SGS inspector there. Just stay there. We'll have one within 2 hours, and we'll take care of it. Confirms to me that the seal was different, so we know it's not the seal that left the warehouse. So the truck driver on the way to the port stole half of it. And I say, you want me to compensate you the money, or do you want me to, I have a customer who has some in stock. I'll make sure that it's delivered to you. I'll take all the costs, but whatever it is, I'm covering it. And he's like, holy shit, that's customer service.
Yeah.
And I said, listen, this is important to me. I know that you put your last money on this, that you're just starting out in this business and you have commitments. How would you like to solve this? Here are the options. Mm-hmm. And after that, the loyalty that you build up, it's incomparable. You can't put a figure on it. But when the shit hit the fan, they were paying me. We still lost a couple of $1 million.
Yeah.
But the fact that I was able to collect $3 million in a time when everything was just collapsing, I think it was quite an achievement. But it was very stressful. Yeah. It was really, really stressful for us.
And where do you go from there?
A crisis of genre. At a certain point, when you're doing this for, I think it was a little over 8 years, every situation, every problem, like, solution number 26, or that's how we handle this, or that's how we handle that. It was just kind of getting boring. And I'm also in the process.
Did you, sorry, just before you go right into that, I'm just curious, you've had some ups and downs in this entrepreneurial venture. Have you begun to be able to build your fortune a little bit by then? Have you gotten the first big step in...
I was independently wealthy by the time I was 28.
Okay.
Meaning that I basically had a very successful company. I had good income. I had a fantastic network. So I thought I was set. If the trajectory was continuing, and then shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
We are on the verge of bankruptcy.
And how old are you here, just for the
So this
sake
is
of the
98.
timeline?
I'm 32.
Okay, got you. Perfect.
It was a really great thing to happen when you're 32. To be in a bankruptcy situation when you're 32, and to be able to overcome that, supersede the problems, it gives you a confidence boost that you can handle anything.
Yeah.
It's really difficult for people who start out as entrepreneurs past the age of 50, because for them the threat of the risk, you of course you become less risk averse. You become more risk averse. Less risk taking as you get older. But it was good. It was horrible at the time. I'm like, fuck, $2 million just down the drain. God damn it, Peter, why did you give credit to all these assholes? But the most important thing in these situations, you're a team.
Yeah.
If you're going to be, passing on blame, and we overcame that. And, Peter and I are very close friends. And
that's good to remember.
It's really, really critical. This is why I always one of the things I tell the founders, in startups. One of the most important things is your team. There has to be added value, but it's another thing you guys need to trust each other.
Yeah.
Because if you start apportioning blame and recriminations, I don't want to be in it. I don't want to be involved. Just keep me out of this. I don't need the drama. If you guys can't work together in difficult times, it's sort of like the advice I gave to all my sons: before you decide to settle down with someone, go traveling with them.
Yeah.
Because unexpected shit happens when you travel, especially beyond the borders of your country, beyond the EU borders, and see how they react when the rental car that you reserved isn't there, or the plane is delayed, or the hotel room has leaky, whatever.
Yeah.
How do they react?
Yeah.
Or food poisoning, God forbid. How will they, deal with it?
A couple of those examples remind me of our conversation earlier, that you had a good life principle about how you can, a simple way to define a nice person that you can look for in those hard situations.
Yeah, I live by this. You can't be a nice person if you're a dick to the waitress.
Yeah.
If you're mean to the waitress, it kind of came back to me the other day. I was watching a video. Sometimes I indulge myself watching entitled people get their comeuppance. My wife thinks it's, why are you watching this? And so it's this woman. There's this scene. It's a country club. And it starts out with a body cam of a policeman who comes in, and there's this woman who's like ranting and raving at the counter of this country club. And he says, ma'am, you have to leave the premises. You're trespassing. The management called us, and you have to leave. And she starts ranting and raving at him and yada, yada, yada. And he says, ma'am, you have to leave. And he's like, trying to direct her toward the door. And she like pushes past him. Okay, you don't put your hands on an American cop. That's a great way to
That's a no-no.
Try out the new handcuffs he just bought. So he cuffs her, and they take her out. And then her girlfriends come out, and they're yada, yada. So the whole thing was, she was served tea, and the water wasn't hot enough, and she called the waitress and told the waitress the water wasn't hot enough. And the next thing she saw was the waitress was talking to another waitress instead of getting her hot water. So she came up to the desk to bitch and moan about the you don't know what she was talking about to the other colleague, and to raise such a stink out of it, to end up in cuffs and on the star of YouTube now. It's like, you don't like the service, write a review, call the manager or tell him later. But to create that kind of a scene, but most of the time it's the service staff who's overworked, underappreciated, underpaid, getting all this bullshit, entitlement, taking yourself too seriously, huge no-nos for me. It's just such a turnoff. And I also tell that to founders. If you see those traits, It's sort of like, what do you do when you encounter a sociopath? Run. Just run. You can't change them. You can't. It's like, you know, the idea, well, I can explain it to them, and then they'll be nice. And no, they won't. They'll hide
Good
it.
luck.
You know, and I unfortunately had a number of sociopaths that I encountered in business. So, and it's very, very expensive. I had my middle son, when he was 18, he decided, I want to break free. I want to go on my own. He received this børneopsparing, which is people in Denmark, they put money away for their kids, and when they turn 18, they get that lump sum. So it's not taxed. It's tax deductible. It's got a little higher interest rate. So instead of -1%, it's
it's zero.
Yeah, right. And so my son gets this money. He's 18, my middle son, and he says, "I want to rent a flat. I'm going to gymnasium. I want to rent a flat." I'm like, "Well, that's kind of expensive, you know, on your own." He goes, "No, I have a roommate, and I'm not going to mention any names." And I said, "Well, what do you know about her?" It's like, "Oh, she's really great. She's a lot of fun. Her dad's a real dick, and her family is real assholes, and she wants to move out." I'm like, "And that's what she told you?" Okay, you know that's called hearsay. I mean, you don't know.
Yeah.
And I said, "Well," he said, "Oh, I already signed a lease contract." I'm like, "Whoa, who's on the contract?" "Me." "Well, what about her?" "Oh, she's my subletter." I'm like, "You know, you have the onus of responsibility vis-a-vis the landlord. Your contractual relationship is exclusively with the landlord. So she, you know, if she does something untoward, it's your problem. It's on you." "No, she would never do that."
That won't happen.
3 months later, he says, "Dad, you were right. She's a real wanker. You know, she cheats, she lies, she doesn't pay the rent. She's a real sociopath." I'm like, "Oh, and how much did that cost me?" "Yeah, 20,000 krona." I'm like, "Oh my God, that's fantastic." He goes, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "That is the cheapest lesson you could possibly. If I could have, I mean, I've lost millions with sociopaths, and that's okay." Because I've also earned money, and it's a life lesson. It's It's only lost if you didn't learn anything from it. It's just an expensive education.
That's important.
You know, you if you didn't learn from it, then you're a fool. My father always said, "You know, Ilya, both smart people and dumb people make mistakes." I'm like, "Yes, this is going somewhere, right?" There. He goes, "Yes, you know difference." I go, "What?" "Smart people learn from their mistakes. Dumb people collect them."
Oh.
Yeah. So it's only a mistake if you didn't learn from it. You know, I said, "Look, this is such an inexpensive lesson for you. This is sociopath. Stay away. Here. Look, introspection. Look at what signs there were beforehand, and watch for those."
Yeah.
You know, and don't take someone's word for it. It turns out that she was a real sociopath, and her parents had huge problems with her, as her siblings did. But you can't correct that.
No.
I mean, she was screwing her own family. What makes you think she'd be real nice to you?
Yeah. You're her savior.
Oh, and he likes that messianic complex. He's rescue
Yes,
damsel.
exactly.
Yeah.
The rescuer. I'm gonna straighten you out. You're gonna be my project, and
That's
I'm gonna sort everything out. I come from a good family. My granddad and my dad, they taught me some real good things.
Yes.
So,
But that's
listen to me.
hubris, right?
Yeah.
Unfounded optimism that you could actually change people. No.
No, you can definitely influence them, but the real change gotta come from the inside of those people.
Right. Right.
And with sociopaths, that's typically a very, very long way if they ever reach that.
But the thing is, they're wired differently.
Yeah.
It's not that they're fundamentally bad. And I've dealt with functioning sociopaths. You just have to know to what level you can trust what they say and understand what their motivation is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And if you do it within that scope, that's perfectly fine. It's sort of like you deal with people with disabilities. Like, for example, I'm pretty much deaf in my right ear.
Okay.
And then I advise people, this is why I'm sitting right here, before we had the headsets on.
Yeah.
And when we sit at a dinner in a restaurant, I sit strategically, and my wife is deaf in her left ear. So we kind of bookending tables on opposite ends, and that way we can hear each other. But if we're standing in a certain way, people can tell, oh, they're not talking to each other. You know, my left, my right ear to her left, I'm like, oh, they're not talking to each other. You know, like, so,
crazy.
but it is a disability,
Yeah.
and you just have to accept it. That's the
Yeah.
way they are. It's sort of like, some people who have software developers say, well, developers sometimes are a little different. They can be on autistic scale, but for them, it works really well.
Yeah.
So certain jobs are so. For example, air traffic controllers, right? An incredibly demanding, focused job. Well, I met a couple of, and I'm not saying it as a general rule. I don't know enough to make a blanket accusation statement about them, but some that I've met have been different, which is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
As long as you know that.
Yeah, exactly. As long as you know and how to utilize that for your benefit, right?
Right. Or for theirs. Yeah.
And speaking of sociopaths or not, but people who are, coming with motivations that are hard to identify, a really crazy and interesting part of your personal journey has been this whole run-in with Interpol and the detainment in Germany and everything like that under false pretenses. Can you kind of tell us that story as well?
Yeah.
Because holy cow, Mikkel and I, we're entrepreneurs ourselves. We've gone through the entrepreneurial roller coaster. I've also moved countries and things like that. And, sometimes we can be like, wow, this is tough. Like, this is a really tough way to have a career. And then we heard your story, and we're like, okay, there's another level of tough you can run into.
We got humbled.
Yeah, we got humbled by that. So it would be really interesting for us if you could share that story.
Sure. Well, I think it's really important when looking at situations to be not so hasty in qualifying them and saying, boy, this is the worst thing that could possibly happen, or this is horrible, or actually the complete opposite. This is the best thing that could have happened. Time will tell. I'm reminded of a quote by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of China, Zhou Enlai, when asked about his thoughts on the French Revolution, what he thought the consequences were. He said, "Too early to tell."
Oh,
well, I mean, to be fair, I think he was thinking about the 1968 student uprisings and not the 1789 French Revolution. But it sounded like such a great quote when it came out. People were like, "Wow, Chinese have a really long
perspective."
Exactly. So, what happened? As I said, I had a crisis of genre, been there, done that. Everything with food trading was, overcame a crisis. We're back up on the horse again, found a fantastic product in South America, pork from South America, which was considerably cheaper. We were the first ones to import it into Russia. Made a shitload of money. Nobody had pork. Pork in Europe was just double the price. And we were just, again, back on the horse. And I was like, sooner or later, as traders, the original suppliers are going to come in and take over the niche. So we're going to have to find another product. And I was just kind of getting tired of it. At the same time, as I was going through my divorce with my first wife, and I got headhunted, of all places, to operate an oil tanker company. Food trading, oil tanker company. And so the motivation there was, by the owners of the company, was that they were looking for someone, they could trust. And like I said, my resume is the most important asset that I have. Someone who had a Western mindset, Western education, and someone who could understand the mysterious Russian nature, which
check.
and also recommended by someone that they trusted. And so there was a confluence of all these things. And so in September of 2000, I'm invited for this meeting, very informal meeting in a casino in Moscow, where the owner of the company, talks about everything other than the job at hand. Basically, a kind of what is that called when you're weeding out, kind
Yeah.
of trying to
Filtering.
just trying to find out what kind of, and it was like for 3 hours. I'm like, hey, maybe we can get something to eat because I'm hungry. I thought we were having dinner. And then I'm a month later, I'm offered this job. So he did additional background work, and I'm offered this job, and it's actually a kind of funny story associated with it. November 15th, 2000, I am in Samara, which is a city on the Volga River, where the headquarters of the oil tanker companies, and also a place where their 2 major oil refineries are.
Okay.
That at that point are owned by Yukos Oil. And the oil tanker company was also previously owned by Yukos Oil, Mr. Khodorkovsky's company. And I'm at the AGM, and I'm in the hotel room. So there's an AGM on that day, and I'm in the hotel room, and I'm listening to the Russian news. And they say, and there's some news from Denmark. The Queen Mother just passed away. That's Ingrid Marie, Margrethe's mother. Year 2000, November. And she outlived her husband by just a couple of years. That's Frederick IX, who died in 1970, what?
Yeah.
How do you not, check? So this was my perfect example of don't believe everything that you hear on the news. So this is Russia's number one, the first channel, like Denmark's radio, number one, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, okay. Anyway, just an anecdote aside, I'm at this AGM, and I'm introduced as the person who would be responsible for all the commercial operations. And of course, people are wondering, who is this? Who is Mr. Katsnelson? My previous experience, I sold pork and beef and fish, and so obviously we had to temper the story that I'm, a Western-educated businessman with experience in sales and logistics, which is true. And so my task was to look at this oil tanker company that had been inherited from the Soviet times, very poorly managed, mismanaged, were to a point where it had to sell off its ships to raise enough money during the winter to pay off the salaries of its employees. And it was a monopolist on the river during the Soviet times.
And you don't really want to be selling assets for that purpose.
Exactly.
In a proper functioning
You're
company.
basically creating competition for yourself, because who's buying your ships? Well, they weren't doing it for scrap. They were creating competition.
Wow.
So I was looking at it, and I was seeing the way that the company was being operated, the commercial operations, where basically there were a very limited number of players on the river who had cargo. And each one of them, in order to be sure that they would have capacity, they would charter the ships. Because they knew, okay, we control the ships, they're ours, nobody can take them away from us. Because we can't trust them that they will commit to taking out a certain quantity, but they don't. They give it to somebody who gives them higher bidder. There's corruption, in the commercial operations. And then we stuck in our tanks are at capacity, and we got more product coming in, and we're overflowing, and you can't have that.
Oh.
So my job was to study the market, look at our resources, see what our actual capacity was. And what I saw is that our capacity was, undervaluating our capacity by at least 30%. So I said, just by changing the mode of operation, I can increase, instead of chartering the vessel specifically, but committing to a cargo, I can increase by 30% the cargo carrying capacity.
That's a lot.
Then I looked at the Russian navigation season. So the river's frozen right now. So it opens up in March, usually, and closes in November. But in the south, it starts earlier than in the north, for obvious reasons. So the way the ships have been placed at the end of the season
makes a big difference.
I could have at least 1 or 2 runs. I could have a whole month of navigation in the south. So I was like looking at all these logistical points. And sometimes what we would do, we had to take a ship out into the estuary port, like the Baltic Sea, and it had to get back. And we had to do it before the locks closed. Well, that means I have to have an extra week of operations. Well, what if I send the ship out and let it winter in the Baltics? You know, and when the navigation starts, well, it can come back because at the port, there's not enough loading facilities. I have ships waiting in line. Well, while they're waiting in line, you can make it back. The problem with that was, well, then you have to fly the crew. I'm like, but the cost of flying the crew is like, a couple of $1,000s.
Yeah.
Do you know what a whole load of cargo is? Like $150,000. So, one department would say, no, we have to have the crew back. That's a very expensive way to take a crew back, sail the whole goddamn tanker, empty. You lose a whole load. So just those kind of things. And basically, we were able to convince, because I was dealing with the oil companies. I'm this Western guy, and I have a reputation that I'm not corruptible. They believe me, and they signed the contracts for cargo capacity, not for ships. And then I could move the ships around any way I wanted to.
That's pretty cool. And you actually didn't have specific experience in this type of industry before.
I had a lot of help.
Yeah.
So this idea, actually, when you said self-made man, everything that we do, from my father's mentoring, from the pedagogues, the teachers around me, from my business partners, from the people I work with, I pick up knowledge. This idea of self-made man, no. Picking up the right things, that's a skill. I mean, I got this poster of Elon Musk. He didn't start Tesla.
No.
But I love my Tesla, and I'm really happy that he followed through and created this IT company that also has wheels.
Yeah.
So the idea of taking credit for something, like a lot of American capitalists, well, I built that. Oh, really? And who created the educational system to teach your employees? Who created the infrastructure to build the roads, the aviation, the IT infrastructure? Who created the court system to protect your IP? This idea, well, I don't want to pay taxes. Well, yeah. And we know countries that where they don't pay taxes, how your property rights are protected.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot from the people around me. So if one thing I can take credit for with the Volga Tanker project is hiring a really great team. And so because we had such a great, I'll segue into what hiring a great team meant in the end. Creating such a successful company, you become a target in Russia. So when they, and we could kind of see this, it was, in the, you're written in the coffee grinds. When they attacked Yukos to steal Khodorkovsky's company, they first took over his oil fields. Then they took the refineries. Well, it was just natural. They would take out the vessels that took out the cargo.
Yeah.
And so we could kind of see it happening, but all our efforts to try to convince them, or the owners of the company, I was not an owner. I did not have any equity stake in the company. I was just, I had fiduciary responsibility to protect shareholder value by being an effective manager.
Yeah.
They try to convince.
CEO.
No. I worked in a Danish company that had a contract to operate the ships. I never worked in Russia, meaning I did not was never employed by a Russian company.
Okay.
I was never a resident in Russia legally, nor illegally, nor was I in any way involved in internal operations of the shipping company. My job was to operate the commercial aspects of it from a Danish company. So they, together, we created an incredibly successful enterprise. And so that is a perfect, becomes a perfect target for a hostile takeover. And in Russia, hostile takeover is different than hostile takeovers in the West. Hostile is with weapons, balaclava hats, raiding homes and offices. That's hostile.
Yeah,
so basically,
that's hostile.
We could see the writing on the wall. And I was physically in Russia because a lot of my customers were in Russia. And I had a team because we're operating the commercial operation in Russia. And I was called into the office of the CEO, the president of the company. And I get into his office, and together with him is the head of corporate security. Now, just to be clear, corporate security isn't some IT person. Viktor Ivanovich Stepin was a former lieutenant general in the KGB, retired. He was the head of security at Volga Tanker.
That's hardcore.
And of course, he had a network of contacts. And so I'm like, oh, Viktor Ivanovich, how's it going? He goes, Ilya, nice to see you. I'm like, what's up? And they sit me down and said, Ilya, you have to leave the country. And I'm like, what do you mean? You have to go back to Denmark.
Does he say that with a very calm?
Very calm, very calm. There's no
stress.
You don't want the rabbit to get excited. You know, like I'm like, and I'm for 4 years from 2000 to 2004. This is August 2004. I'm home in Denmark every second weekend to be with my older sons. Mm-hmm. I may be divorced from my ex-wife, but I'm not divorced from my children. So I'm with my kids every second weekend. I mean, at Aeroflot, I became a multi-frequent flyer, diamond. I mean, they knew, it's Katsnelson's weekend. You know, it's like that's like 20-some trips, round trips a year, because vacations, I would take them on vacation. So, and they say, you have to go back to Denmark. I was like, I was just there this weekend. They go, no, you have to go and you have to stay. So for how long? Oh, and my wife, by the way, is 8 months pregnant at the time.
Okay.
And she's in Russia.
She's in Moscow with me. And they said, we don't know. It might blow over, it might not, but you're a critical component of the survivability of this company. I'm like, okay. I said, what's up? I said, well, in Russia, and I knew this, so we didn't really have to discuss it. But just to give you a background, in Russia, corporate raiding, hostile takeover, is done using 3 mechanisms. So the first one, you saddle the company with tax liability. All of a sudden, there's a tax debt out of nowhere. We think you owe money, $128 million.
Okay, just that.
Right. So that's one aspect. Second aspect, you threaten the management with legal prosecution. Well, yeah, you guys, created a tax liability, so that's personal liability, criminal, yeah. And the third, you arrest the bank accounts. So the company can't pay for itself. And basically, within a month, maximum 2, you take over the company. Because the management is like, we're out of here.
Yeah, that sounds pretty
efficient. And the
efficient.
owners are like, how much can we get out of this, without being in jail? And because all the commercial operations were done by a Danish company, and I'm in Denmark, I'm an American citizen with a Danish residency, they can't threaten me, so I think at the time, with arrest. They can't freeze the bank accounts because bank accounts are in Denmark. And, the tax debt's fine. Go through the court system,
Because it's not real.
Well, not only is it not real, the egregious aspect of it is that they're accused, the tanker company is accused of illegally obtaining $128 million in VAT refunds, even though they're not entitled to it. Now, just to give you an idea, VAT refunds, this is an export tanker company. So for its services, which are related to export, there's no VAT. So that's point number 1.
Yeah.
But doesn't matter in Russia. The tax authorities won't give you the VAT back. You have to go to courts. So Volga Tanker, in order to get the refund of every single one of those 128 million, had gone to arbitration court and won over 200 arbitration cases. So on the books, there are court cases that say that the oil tanker company is owed this money by the tax authorities. And at the same time, there's a criminal investigation by the tax authorities for illegal refund of VAT.
And it's like the most documented thing you can have.
Right.
Wow.
And so they're thinking, the owners are like, okay, they tried to steal the company, didn't work out. They can't make try to make do, and we'll find some kind of a compromise, pay them off. So I'm in Denmark because if they take me hostage, the whole house of cards collapse.
Yeah.
So I'm in Denmark, I'm safe. But I have a team in Russia. And talking about picking the right cadre, for the next 2 years, I operate the company remote control. And it works perfectly.
Wow.
That's
But
amazing.
after 2 years, the assholes who wanted to steal the company, they said, enough of this. They filed criminal charges against me, put me on Interpol, and freeze the company. Just nose to shore, arrest the vessels during the winter, because there's not much cargo carrying in the winter except
okay.
in the Caspian Sea.
So
And the owners say, okay, we give up. But to get their revenge on me from for 2 years from stealing the company, basically fulfilling my fiduciary responsibility, protecting shareholder value, they put me on Interpol. I don't know this. I have no idea that I'm on Interpol because it's a secret Interpol notice, as like 70% of all Interpol notices are secret.
and what does that mean?
The target is not aware of it.
What
It's
does
not
it
on
even
the-
mean to be on Interpol? Like,
Okay. So there are various degrees of Interpol notices. There's a blue notice, which basically means Interpol is a database.
yeah.
They send out to all member states. They put it into their database. Oh, blue notice. The country that it's asking would like information on the movement of that person. Don't detain. Just send us back. He crossed the border here.
Sure.
Or it shows up on your radar. That's a blue notice. There's a red notice, detain with the purpose of extradition. I think there's a green notice for children or art objects. There's a yellow notice. There's different notices. Go on Interpol website. So on Interpol website, there's also people who have a red notice on them. But that's less than 30% of actual people who have a red notice on them. Countries do it secretly so they don't spook the deer, right? Their victim. So I'm not aware that
That
I
you
have
got the red notice.
that I have a red notice, except all of a sudden, when I travel to the United States, I'm pulled for secondary inspection. And after this happens like 7 or 8 times, and eventually it happened 30 times in a row. After it happens 7 times, I write my congressman, and she's now a senator from Wisconsin. You know who I'm talking about. Brilliant. And she writes back and says, we contacted a CBP, and they said that it is a matter of national security. They wrote a letter. I saw the response, as if though, I am Al Capone, and they cannot release any information because it's a matter of national security, and hinting the office of the congresswoman at the time says to me, it might be a blue notice because I'm not detained. I'm just sent in for secondary, and they're just passing information. I'm like, what the hell? Blue notice? So I'm assuming there's a blue notice. So I tried to get assistance from State Department, for Justice Department. Nobody will give me any information. So an American citizen that's being illegally pursued by Russia is getting absolutely no assistance from the U.S. government. In fact, they're harassing me every time I stop at the airport. So I contact an attorney, and this is a really important rule. You have to pick the right attorney. My attorney is Jay Johnson. I don't know if you know who Jay Johnson is, but he ended up being the head of Homeland Security of the United States.
There you go.
On the Obama administration, he was the chief counsel for the Pentagon.
Oh.
Yeah, he signed off on that memorandum that allowed American drones to kill American citizens. Well, that's another story.
Yeah.
But anyway, Jay, I'm very grateful to him because he did eventually help me solve this problem. Well, his office did. But the fact that during his confirmation hearings, Senator McCain at that time did a QFR, question for the record. Mr. Johnson, now I can't do the Arizona accent. Mr. Johnson, during your private practice, you had an American citizen who was illegally harassed by the Russians through the Interpol, which resulted in him being stopped many times at the border when entering his home country. What do you intend to do about it? And he responded, I think it is incorrect for American citizens to be harassed by Russians, yada, yada, and I intend to look into the matter and see what procedures can be in place to. Eventually, I wrote to Homeland Security. I was he did not contact me. He acted completely proper and correctly. Once he got into the U.S. government, all our communication stopped because he was no longer my attorney.
Yeah.
But his office looked into this, and after 30 consecutive times of being stopped at the U.S. airport, you know how frustrating that is, especially when you have a connecting flight? I mean, there were times where I'd spend like 4 hours waiting and in limbo. I'm an American coming home.
Yeah.
Why? And they can't detain you, yet they have your passport.
Yeah.
I've never had a problem since. Ever since he became head of Homeland Security, and I was given a case number. They reviewed it, and they said, we reviewed the case. We cannot tell you if we did anything. We cannot tell you if there was any mistakes made. It's a 2-page of legalese.
Yeah.
But I am grateful that in the end, that issue was resolved.
That's super nice.
That brings me to, that's in the States.
Right.
But now you have a situation where you're going through Germany.
Right.
And you're driving and you get pulled over.
Yes.
As I understand it.
Yeah.
By police in Germany.
Yes.
And who's sitting in that car? Are you alone?
So I'm with my business partner. It's his car. And I'm with my lawyer, who's my very close friend. And we're stopped about 5 kilometers from Puttgarden. Like 5 kilometers from the ferry to get into Denmark. And we're stopped, and there's this BMW, it's late at night, pulls out in front of us, and it's got the backlights flashing. I thought it was a joke. It says, "Stop, Polizei. Stop, Polizei." Stop. I'm like, is this like, you
like
know,
a prank?
it's a red BMW, you know, like M5 or something like that, you know. I'm like, I thought it was a joke. And they, you know, can we see your, you know, documents? And, you know, I give my driver. We all give our driver's license. Yeah. And they come back and said, "Oh, Herr Katsnelson, do you have a passport?" And I'm like, "Yes." "Why?" "It's a Danish driver's license." "Yeah, but we just want to make sure that can we have your passport, please?" So I give him my passport. They come, "Oh, Mr. Katsnelson, there's an Interpol arrest order on you. You have to come with us." And hands my lawyer. He's like, "Whoa, hang on. There's an extradition case in Denmark. It's already been refused by the Danish authorities. There's no issue here. We're going to Denmark, you know." I said, "I'm sorry. You have to come to the police. You were welcome to drive behind us." Anyway, that was a nightmare. Basically, the next morning, they put me before a judge. It's so perfunctory. It's ridiculous. I get an interpreter. Now, the gentleman was from West Africa. I think he would have been much better with a francophone person than you know. East Africa is English speaking. West Africa is French speaking. He could not really translate for me, and my German is very limited. And basically, the magistrate just said, "Well, we have this inquiry, and you have to be detained." I'm like, "Why?" I mean, so the rule is actually, according to the extradition treaty that exists between the EU and Russia, and I don't know if it's changed since then. This was 2008. If any of the countries, so if any European country asks Russia to extradite someone, to detain someone with the purpose of extradition, the country is given 40 days to present documentation to justify this request. And in the meantime, the country that has detained the person can keep him in jail. Now, if I was a German resident, they probably would have done either house arrest or taken my passport away. But because I'm an American and a Danish resident, they just put me in a maximum security jail.
Maximum security jail.
Well, I was the closest one in Lübeck. Yeah, it was just luck of the draw. And the way they took me to jail, so when they took me from the police station to the courthouse, so this is kind of interesting, the way they did this. The way my Interpol arrest order is written, I would be scared to meet that person. Abuse of authority, money laundering, fraud, self-enrichment, $128 million. That figure, by the way, they were fixated on $128 million.
Apparently.
Someone liked that number.
And so I am in this police cell, and all of a sudden the door opens, and these 3 mountains of men in balaclava hats, face covered, put a bag on my head, handcuffs on me, and are leading me somewhere. And I'm thinking, oh my God, extraordinary rendition. I'm like, oh, they're not sending me to Russia. I am shitting bricks. Figuratively. And the thing is, at the front of the police station, my lawyer and Peter, my friend, are there. They spent the night in Lübeck, to be there. And he's my lawyer, and he speaks fluent German, by the way. They wouldn't let him represent me. They wouldn't even let him into the courthouse. So they take me downstairs, and they got this bag on me, and I have an issue with my vestibulary apparatus. I get seasick. And they put me in this car, and I know it's an armored car because I can hear how the door closes.
Yeah.
And they say, I said, you have to take this bag off me. Oh, and I'm between 2 guys with machine guns, right, in the back seat. And they said, you have to take this bag off me. And they said, no, you have to have your face covered. I said, okay, then I'm going to throw up in it. They said, okay, we take it off, but you have to keep your head down. I said, the whole point is I have to see the line of the horizon. They kind of looked at each other. It's like Laurel and Hardy, like, okay. And I'm looking. There's a armored car in front of me, armored car behind me, police car at the tail end, police car at the front end, and a helicopter. And they're taking me to the courthouse with the sirens going, and the tuk-tuk-tuk-tuk-tuk-tuk-tuk-tuk. I'm like, wow, that is a lot of resources,
Holy shit.
So I get to the courthouse, and I'm expecting that they'll let Hans in to represent. Nope, not happening. I get this translator. I don't get, an attorney, nothing. There's off to jail. And in the same way, they take me to jail. This is Friday evening by now. All the regular personnel at the jail is gone for the weekend. It's only, the skeleton staff. And all of a sudden, they see this cortege of armored helicopter bringing this guy in. And they don't know who the hell I am.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's funny now. But at the time, I'm like, what is happening to me? I'm like, so they take me to jail, and I'm put in isolation, solitary confinement, in this very bare cell. There's a toilet, but it's basically a stainless steel a toilet sink. There's not even a seat. And I have a book with me. I have one book with me. I was reading the biography of Mao Zedong. I mean, about all the horrors the asshole committed. That's the only book I have. And they take my watch. They give me these prison clothes. They take my clothes, and I'm put into the cell, and that's it. And so I was kept in solitary for 5 days. And
wow.
The only way that I could kind of keep I was very stressed. Just to give you an idea, I lost 6 kilos in 10 days.
Holy shit.
It's better than Wegovy. I mean, I'm telling you, better than Ozempic. On the 10th day, I was calling. I got to use things got better.
Yo,
I mean,
okay.
so I call my
I hope
attorney.
so.
I call my attorney Hans. I'm like, he goes, "How are you?" I'm like, Hans, I lost 6 kilos in these 10 days. He goes, people spend a lot of money going to Baden-Baden for that,
Hans is like, look at the bright side.
That's a real friend.
Hans was brilliant. Just to give you an idea. So he's my attorney. He's a very busy man. He was allowed to visit me once a week. I'm there for 7 weeks. Every week, he would drive from Copenhagen to Lübeck. That's about 4.5 hours. Spend 2 hours with me and drive 4.5 hours back.
That's a real friend.
That I will never forget that. I mean, that meant so much to me. Because for me, he was my lifeline. There were only 3 people who were allowed to see me, and besides U.S. Embassy staff who visited me twice. But anyway, so I'm in this situation, and I'm stressed. I don't know what's going to happen to me. I don't know if they're going to extradite me. I'm like, what is going on here? How do you do shit like this? So in the process, you learn. So I would, in Germany, in the preliminary confinement, you get you spend 23 hours in a cell, and 1 hour you get Freistunde, which means exercise hour.
Okay.
And it's a very nice exercise place. It's like a field between two houses, blocks of cells. But it's because I was in solitary, I could not be out with the general prison population. So I could see through the window they were out walking, and they changed the time of your exercise hour. It could be 6 in the morning, or it could be noon, to make sure that no helicopter comes in. And it changes every time.
Okay, sure.
I mean, it never repeated. It never consistently, week over week.
It's a whole different world.
Right. So let me tell you about prison conditions in Germany. And so what I would do is this 1 hour that I got, I would just go to the middle of the field, and I would do Tai Chi. And like my blood pressure, because they took me to the infirmary, my blood pressure, now normal blood pressure, like 105 or over 80. I'm like a boa constrictor.
Yeah.
165. Like consistently 165 or 110. I mean, I was like peaked. So I would do this Tai Chi, and on the 5th day, I convinced them, A, I'm not a threat to them. B, I'm not a threat to the general population. And C, I'm not a threat to myself, which is really, really important. Because otherwise, you're in a room with the light on.
Yeah,
it's really important. That's those three like critical things. I'm like, why are we keeping him in solitary? And plus, because I had been open previously and had articles written about me, they started Googling my name.
of course.
And so all of a sudden, instead of this criminal, Interpol, Russia, Red Notice, fraud, they started reading about me. I'm like, what? On the 12th day, the head of the prison, the director of the prison, she came in with an interpreter to my cell. And by that time, I was in the women's infirmary. There were no women there. I had a all cell to myself because I have claustrophobia. Well, trust me, you'll get one too if you're in this situation.
I can imagine.
So I had this huge 28 square meter room, 3 beds, but I was the only one there. Huge windows, my private shower stall, And she comes in and she goes, Herr Katsnelson, we know you don't belong here. We'll try to make your stay as least uncomfortable as possible, but we just have to follow the rules. I'm like, I say, yeah, just following orders. Yeah.
That's the German way.
I didn't say that. The personnel, once they understood what the situation was, were very, very kind.
That's nice.
I mean, I am very, very grateful, especially to the pastor. Now, I'm Jewish, but I have a great amount of respect for people who act as counselors. And the prison chaplain, Pastor Abaya, he was with me almost every single day. He would come in and we would talk about philosophy. He was practicing his English. I just needed somebody to talk to. Yeah. And we became very good friends. And he's been visiting me almost every year except COVID. He had a hiatus.
Really?
Yeah,
that's amazing.
He retired. He told me at one point, you're my raison d'etre. After 25 years being in prison, I knew that I actually helped someone. So I'm very grateful to him. Like I said, there have been people along my life's path who, showed kindness and support, and I never forget a kindness. So, yeah. On the 5th day, I'm out for Freistunde with the general population. Now, there's a very large contingent of Russian prisoners in German jail system.
Okay.
Mafia. Well, the Russian organized criminal group. And they're actually quite nice when you meet them under those circumstances. They're actually, everybody's pretty cool. No, this isn't like the American prison system. Don't drop the soap. It's like, I did not 50 days that I spent exactly 50 days in a German prison. I didn't see any violence. Some people were distraught, but. So anyway, I'm walking around the Freistunde, and one of the Russian guys who I was told he's the boss,
leader.
and he's got like 2 bodyguards around him. they're kind of walking a little faster to catch up with me. And as they catch up, and they know that I speak Russian because, the guards communicate. And they actually, on the second day, from some of the other prisons, they brought me newspapers and books in Russian.
Okay.
So they saw that I had this mouse. Maybe you want something lighter reading. And they kind of catch up with me, So he turns to me and goes, "So, Karate Kid, what are you in here for?" And I'm like, "Nothing." He goes, "Yeah, but why?" So I kind of, told him. He goes, like day 15, we're walking around, and we got to talking a lot. He goes, "God, Ilya, I'm so glad that you're here. I mean, I haven't had an intelligent person to talk with for a whole year." I'm like, "Dude, I'm not glad I'm here." He goes, "Yeah, I understand, but I really enjoy our conversations."
The circumstances.
Yeah, so basically, they're allowed to keep people in jail for 40 days before the Russians can give Russians 40 days to send in the documents. So you figure, okay, day 35, no documents. Day 36, no document. Day 30, they sent it on the 39th day.
Of course.
Intentionally, just
Jeez.
they did it on purpose. And what they did was, because concurrently there was an extradition request in Denmark, and it was about this thick, but it was just a lot of bullshit. The German one was this thick.
Okay.
I mean, they didn't even include the stuff that
didn't
was in
even
the
try.
Danish one. They didn't even try because it was too expensive to translate into German, I imagine. But we already knew what they were going to accuse me of, and we already had the defense folder because I had attorneys working in the UK because one of the owners, actually two of the owners, got asylum in the UK. They got refugee status because they found their case to be politically motivated by that time already.
Okay.
So my case was, clear cut. Everybody involved in the case was politically persecuted. I'm just collateral damage. I'm just the manager who they're pissed at for not letting him steal the company. And within 10 days, the German court rules to immediately release me and provide me. And this is funny. So I told you how they brought me into jail, right? So on the day 50, Hans is waiting for me. The pastor's there to say goodbye. And I'm about to get into the car with Hans. And then there's 3 police cars, a van and 2 escort cars. No helicopter. And they're like, "Herr Katsnelson, would you like to come with us to the ferry from the Lübeck prison?" Oh, and the argument that we used was that I was being illegally persecuted by the Russians, and under the Dublin II Treaty, I could seek asylum. I could seek refuge from that. And so I'm like, "Whoa, hang on just a second. I'm looking at hands. Hey, I don't like being in another police vehicle." No, it is for your protection. I'm like, "And whom might you be protecting me from?"
Yeah.
The Russians, of course. And I'm like, okay, Hans is like, humor them. Just get in the car. We're going to the ferry. We have a laissez-passer for you. You're fine. We have a court order.
Yeah.
So we get to the ferry, the Puttgarten Rebü ferry, and they say there's a queue, people trying, passengers getting on, and they're dressed in civilian clothes. There's 4 of them, 2 men and 2 women, federal police. And then they come up to the front of the queue and say, "Excuse me," and they show their badges. And they say, "We need to see the captain." They let him on board, and I'm following. I'm just like, "Hey, here I am." And they call the captain, and he comes down and says, "We're armed officers. We're here to escort this gentleman safely to Denmark." Because the captain needs to be aware of their federal officers who are armed on board. And then I said, "Do I have to do you shadow?" "No, we'll just place ourselves strategically." And that's when I had my first Danish hot dog, and God knows how long on board the ferry.
It must have tasted good.
When you look back on that whole experience, is there one reflection, talking to the pastor, but also talking to the Russian mob guy, is there one reflection there that you look back on that you've carried with you, or a principle?
I realized that I could talk to anybody.
Yeah?
Well, I mean, look at the range of people. I mean, I won't mention the person's name, but he was in for organized crime.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was a leader of an organized crime group who were doing extortion, carjackings. I mean, I'm not going to give too many details, otherwise people find out who it is. And these are the kind of people you don't want offended. No, but he was actually very pleasant when he was not in that setting.
Yeah.
And in a way, very talented. And I hope he has successful life and his family is doing fine. So I could talk to him, and I really enjoyed talking to the pastor, and I also. The fact that my friends, I had one of my friends was my neighbor. He was a very accomplished psychiatrist. And when he found out that I was in prison, he drove with his wife, went to and he's like well known in the world. And he got permission to visit the prison doctor. And he said, he's my patient. He has claustrophobia. You cannot put him in a cell. You have to maintain him in this environment. He also spent 2 hours with me, which was the allotted time, and drove back 4.5 hours. So, I mean, I am very, very grateful that a lot of people stepped up, supported my family.
Yeah.
And so when I got out, I took it upon myself, first of all, to tell about the story, because sooner or later, the fact that I was imprisoned in Germany on Interpol Red Notice, whoever it is, a business partner or a banker or attorney or my accountant, they will find out. It is better that they hear it from me, and better that I am very open about it. It's sort of like, and I don't want to in any way equate myself to the trauma suffered by a rape victim, but for them to keep quiet is actually protecting the criminal, protecting the assailant. Just to be clear, my experience is nothing like that. So I talked about it, and then I realized that the Russians were doing this not just to me, but to a lot of people who don't have the resources, both financial, network, family, support resources, and they were getting away with it. And the worst thing is they were doing it to refugees. And under the Refugee Convention, Article 31 states that you can never be sent back to the country which you fled, from which you received refuge.
Mm-hmm.
And the Interpol Convention, Red Notice, is detention with the purpose of extradition. So if the country from which you sought refuge is trying to extradite you, that's a violation of the Refugee Convention. So for France, for example, or Spain, to stop a recognized refugee, harass them at airport points or transition points, is basically doing the dirty work for the Russians. They'll never extradite him, but they might put him in jail until they figure things out. So what we did was working with the General Secretary of OSCE Parliamentary Assembly here in Copenhagen. They really got involved. At that time, the General Secretary was Spencer Oliver, a really brilliant man and a good friend. And with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, we got Interpol to change that. So now if a person is a refugee and either they become aware that they are on the red notice, or something happens and they don't want it to be repeated, they can contact the Committee for Control of Interpol Files, and they most likely be removed, and we'll get a letter from Interpol saying that it's politically motivated, they're refugees, they should not be detained.
That's an amazing initiative.
I'm very proud that I had a role in it, because I publicized my case. I testified before the U.S. Congress for the Joint Senate Congressional Helsinki Committee, the OSCE Committee. Actually, it was during the same session that Bill Browder testified about Sergei Magnitsky, who was still alive at that time and imprisoned. This was in June of 2009. And unfortunately, Sergei was murdered, and as a result, there was the Magnitsky case, Magnitsky laws to punish the corrupt Russian officials. But I was very public about it.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to be public about these things.
I think on that behalf, I would like to say thank you for all the ones you've been a big support in pulling this one through. and we're more or less running out of time. But I think already now I would like to invite you back on the podcast to get the next chapter of the story, which involves how you accumulated most of your wealth, but also how you invest in startups. And from the traits that we've seen from your dad and also yourself, I'm really looking forward to opening that chapter as well.
Sounds good.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing a bit of your story with us. I know that's not always easy to do, but it's been fun, entertaining, interesting, all of the above. And we're looking forward to having you back.
Yeah.
Thank you for the invitation, and good luck with this project.
You've been listening to the Growing Forward podcast with your hosts, Nick and Trav.